shadows. Good afternoon. Actually, that actually works. I was trying to be an idiot again, but good afternoon actually works. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Teeling Night. This one has been in the works since actually before COVID. When I last saw Frank in person, it was, I think, January or February at the famous Hollywood Roosevelt here in Los Angeles. And I told him what I was up to. I had a book coming out, and he's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Thank you for featuring Teeling. Let's do something together to promote the book." And COVID hit, and our plans kind of got dashed and shattered. And we started talking again. I'm like, "Hey, let's do a live stream." He's like, "Let's do a live stream." So I know we have a few new people in the comments in the chat today. So welcome everybody. Hello, hello. It looks like Facebook advertising actually kind of worked. Who would have thought? For those of you who are new here, hello. My name is Sam Nashgreen. I am at the Whiskey Somm. I am the author of Beginner's Guide to Whiskey, Traditions, Type to Taste the Ultimate Spirit. I do these shows almost every week. We took a week off for the holiday, kind of end December, and then go into January with a little bit of time off. And then we're back, bigger and better than ever. I would like to welcome my friends and my guests in no particular order of importance. There's always an order of importance. Mr. Drew Record. Drew is the kind of the West Coast head lead single malt and Teeling Bacardi international ambassador. I'll take it, sure.
And then there is the head honcho for Teeling in basically the U.S. himself, Mr. Frank Jakubka. As you guys are aware, Teeling is a delicious Irish whiskey, and today is going to be no exception to fun and, goofiness. This is my first 3-hour stream. I don't know if you can see, but I got like 5 bottles of water right here next to me because I talk a lot. So eventually I'm going to use up all the air that's in this room, and it'll just be the hot air coming out of my damn mouth. I'm really excited, you guys. This is our first time doing a virtual distillery tour. So we're going to go through the Teeling Distillery, and you'll have the option to ask questions as you guys are looking and you're on YouTube. Please go ahead and hit the live chat button. You can interact, ask comments, say questions, ask questions, say comments, interact with myself, Frank, and Drew. They can also see your messages, and I will be highlighting some unique or some really great questions or some just funny, goofy questions. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to let these fine gentlemen introduce themselves properly. So, Frank, would you here do the honors of going first?
Sure. My name is Frank Jakubka, and I am the West Coast RMM for Teeling Whiskey. So I basically run about half the country, and I have a ball. I've been in this industry since before most of you guys are, I'm sure, watching have been alive, and I am the biggest whiskey nerd in our company whatsoever. Drew is a close second, but we're there. The one thing I want everyone to know.
Fighting words, Frank.
Oh, yeah. And Drew and I love it, too, because we're always geeking out. And we learn something every time from each other. But we want this to be as interactive as possible today, you guys. So any questions, just ask away. There are no dumb questions. Let's have a great time. We have amazing whiskeys to try, some of my absolute favorites. And that's why I'm here at Teeling. When Jack and Stephen called and said, there's a job, I said, what is it? They go, we don't know. We just want you to work for us. And here I am now. So it's a wonderful place to be. The Irish are amazing, and we're going to have a great time in Dublin today. Drew, why don't you tell about yourself?
Hi, so I'm Drew Record. I've been with Bacardi for about 3 years now. I am the West Coast ambassador for our lovely whiskeys, both the Teeling here and then also our single malt portfolio. So if you've ever seen me before, I'm either usually talking about Aberfeldy and Craigellachie or talking about Teeling. I am a whiskey nerd first and foremost. That's how Bacardi found me. I was running the beverage program at the San Francisco Proper Hotel with the boys from Trick Dog at the Bon Vivants, and the 90-hour weeks of hotel life and living in a hotel started to get a little crazy, and Bacardi asked me to take a trip to France to go tour Les Logis, Grey Goose's spiritual home in Grand Champagne Cognac, and it was on that trip that they said, "Hey, we might have some whiskey jobs opening up," and I said, I might be interested, and it's all been history ever since. I get to work with these fantastic whiskeys. I get to work with Frank. The Teeling was added to my portfolio at the beginning of COVID, and I couldn't be happier to have this amazing Irish whiskey to talk about in addition to the single malt. So the tour that you're going to go on today is really a beautiful piece of technology. While I would love to just get us all on a plane to Dublin, I was lamenting the fact to my partner I miss travel so much. Earlier today, this is the next best thing, right? We all get to get on a virtual plane. We get to walk through the distillery. Frank and I get to crack some jokes. Sam gets to crack some jokes, and we should have some fun along the way.
I just want to point out David Stewart, who had the same thought that I did of, I can find some pretty dumb questions to ask.
Hey, Dave will definitely come up with the dumbest questions of them all. I know that for sure with Dave.
I love it.
Good to see you, Dave.
So I promised you guys a virtual distillery tour and tasting, but I also promised you guys some giveaways. So we don't want to reveal too much, but the folks at Teeling have decided they want to do a few giveaways with Beginner's Guide to Whiskey. So that is entirely in their court. I'm going to leave the giveaway and handling of that up to them. But you will probably, after the stream, either they will contact you, or you will have to contact them, and they will sort out shipping and deliverance of the giveaways. So, without further ado,
some lovely T-shirts.
Ooh, T-shirts!
Everyone loves T-shirts.
I always wear my polo shirt. I always wear my polo shirt for stream just because I want to be on my own brand. But I do have a very nice Teeling shirt in the other room. So, guys, let's talk a little bit about Teeling before we go into the distillery tour. So, apparently, words escape me. I've got 5 SKUs right here. The Trinity range, plus the pot still, plus the brand new Black Pits. And obviously, we're all here for the Black Pits. But I want to get to that in a minute. Talk to us, please, if you would, about the Trinity range is, I guess, what you guys call it. That's what I've been calling it, but that's what I keep hearing people refer to it as.
Drew?
Yeah, so it's important for a young brand. We were founded in 2015, right? It's important for a young brand to really define itself right out the gate. And so the idea with that Trinity range is have a core range of whiskeys that's constantly available, that speak to a different style of whiskey for every different type of whiskey drinker. As we go through the tour, we're going to get to meet Jack and Stephen Teeling, at least virtually. We'll get to meet Alex Chaskow, our master distiller and mad scientist behind everything, and you'll start to understand how all of these recipes came about, right? And why the whiskey is the way that it is. But the core range, we've got that small batch that's finished in Central American rum cask. It's great for cocktails. It has that beautiful evocative rummy molasses nose. The single grain is a gateway for bourbon drinkers, right? People that are traditionally American whiskey drinkers. The single grain is this beautiful 95% corn mash bill. It lives its entire life in Napa Valley cab barrels, so it has this elegance to it. It brings something new to the party. And then for all your single malt drinkers, the folks in Scotland that say, "Oh, no, single malt is just Scottish. I could never drink an Irish single malt." I've some bad news for them. The Irish are making damn fine single malt. In fact, we won single malt of the world, right? Just a couple of years ago at the World Whiskey Awards.
Irish were making whiskey before the Scots.
Well, that's a big fight that we could get into. The Irish and the Scots both have some pretty good claims. The Scots would like to remind you that their claim on paper goes back further than any of the Irish claims on paper. But this is a fight. I've got a foot planted firmly on both sides of this fence. I work for an Irish whiskey company and a Scotch whiskey company, so I can't say that.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't, huh?
They've both have roots of making the water of life, Uskabeth, going back to the 1400s. We've got records of people growing barley. We've got all of this. We're not going to settle the debate over who did it first. The Irish, the Scots, they're going to fight. I love going on our distillery tours in Ireland versus the distillery tours in Scotland, and just the little jabs they all give you. One of my favorites, the first time I was in Ireland, they always ask questions, right? And they want to gauge the audience and see how much they know. And they say, well, do you know how long you have to age Scotch whiskey? And, no one raised their hand. And they said, well, it's, you have to age it for 3 years. And then they said, do you know how long you have to age Irish whiskey? And, no one really raised their hands. It was a public tour. And then finally, I was in the back. And I was like, well, it's 3 years and a day. And they're like, exactly. Why is it 3 years and 1 day? I said, well, because you guys like to one up the Scots. And they're like, no, because it's better. It doesn't make it better. It's a day older, and most of what gets bottled is older than 3 years old anyway. But the Scots and the Irish, they love to poke some fun at each other.
Yeah. So working for both Scottish brands and Irish, and we're in a 17. My 17 is firmly planted that the Irish are the ones that came up with it. And we'll take a look at the Red Book of Orsay next time we're there, Drew, and then we'll have to taste them to see.
A friend of the show, Jason Coates, he's a member of the whiskey community on the Whiskord, the whiskey Discord that I hang out in. He says it developed in both nations in the same period. This is a great question from my friend Raj. Speaking of single malt, is the Teeling single malt the whiskey with the most amount of separate cask influences for under 100 US?
There's a lot of whiskeys out there, and so I can never say I know every single thing on the market, but off the top of my head, out of the 1,000 or so whiskeys that I'm kind of scanning on my virtual shelf, I cannot think of a single thing that has more separate cask influences for under 100 US dollars. No, I can't think of any. Frank?
And really, it's about 65 US dollars, and it's in 6 different barrels in its life.
So, I'm empty. So my big question first is, what should I be drinking? What am I going to drink?
Let's start. I think you got to start with the flagship. You got to start with what we want people to pick up every day and know just what we're so proud of, and that is our our small batch.
Small batch.
Our blended whiskey.
That boy right here in the gold tin.
In the gold tin, yes.
A big thank you, by the way, y'all, to my friends.
Oh, top popped.
No.
Well, let's go single grain then. We'll get back to that.
I don't have a corkscrew.
That's right.
It's not handy. It's like it's in the kitchen. I'm in my studio, and it's in the craft surface area.
So
you want to go to pot still? You said, Frank?
No, we'll do single grain.
Single grain.
So the single grain is my favorite way to drink this is with the beer back. All right. So it's not a shot in a beer. It's a sip of whiskey, sip of beer, sip of whiskey, sip of beer. And my wife says, how many drinks have you had? I say 4. It's only 4 drinks because a whiskey and a beer count is 1, not 2. So it's not 8 drinks. It's just 4. And it's a great way to drink this whiskey. It's aged, it spends its entire life in Napa Valley Cabernet barrels like Frank, Rombauer, and Colgan barrels. and you're going to get that red fruit coming through in it. Also, Sam,
Oh,
it's
man.
the oiliest whiskey in the world. If you pour some into your hand and rub your hands together, it feels like lotion. And that's all the fatty acids, because we don't chill filter any of our whiskey.
Ooh, that does feel nice.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
I'm
So
a
when
big
you chill
texture
filter
person when it
something
comes
to
to
get down
food
to
and
40
drink.
alcohol, you're pulling out flavor. All right. So, but we leave all that in there. So you think about it like a pot of chicken soup. You make it today, you put it in the refrigerator, you get a fat cap. If you strip the fat cap, you just took all that flavor away. We leave those fatty acids to combine with phenolic acids, which are, we all know, phenols, and phenols are flavor.
I see from
Oh.
Emily in the chat, she asked, what kind of beer, Frank?
I go first and foremost nice dark beers, but I tell you what, an IPA is great, and then the one that I don't like it with is a wheat beer. For some reason, that I think they clash that there. Being a corn whiskey and the wheat just doesn't mix, but I just really enjoy them.
Yeah, this whiskey, before I came to the company, this was the one that really stopped me dead in my tracks, right? I started my career as a sommelier before I got into the whiskey side of things. I was a wine nerd, which, the thing that both of those have in common are barrel nerds, right? I spent a lot of time, I grew up in Arizona. That's where I started my career. I spent a lot of time coming out to Napa and Sonoma and checking out the wineries and seeing what was going on. And understanding the chemical process that happens in that barrel, right, as the Cabernet Sauvignon is aging and it's seeping into that wood, and over the season, it's combining with the wood and creating new compounds, and how that affects the wine. And then, we ship those barrels over to Ireland, right? We ship them whole. We don't take them apart like some distilleries do. Some distilleries take them down to stave. It's a lot cheaper. You can get a lot more barrels onto a cargo ship. But we stack them, barrel head to barrel head, and send them over so they're still wet. They've got some wine and some water sloshing around in there, and it's pulling some of that cab out. And we put this beautiful, rich, oily, dense corn whiskey in there, and let it do its thing. I think, corn
I
whiskey.
agree. There's nothing wrong with flat packing it and setting it across.
No.
But I feel like you're gonna get that flavor much more powerfully, much better if you ship it wet and ship it whole. Just coat that thing in like paraffin, like film or whatever. Just do that and ship it across on a steamliner or whatever. I don't know.
Because you can put about 98 barrels in a container whole, where you can put about a 2,000 flat pack. So, I mean, there's an economics point behind it, but the flavor profile that comes with it is just absolutely gorgeous. And that's why we decided to bring all our barrels over whole for all our whiskeys.
This is fantastic. I'm getting lots of that nice, rich, like you were saying, the red fruit. I get some of the wine character shining through, the sweetness from this cab. And the fact that it's so light in color too is beautiful. I mean, I don't know if you guys can see it as well as I can over there on your channel, on your show screen, on your screens, on your little YouTube channel, but it's like straw.
Yeah, it's what's crazy about this whiskey in particular, because we do things in such small batches, and because barrels are always different. There are certain batches of this whiskey that come out a little bit rosier than others, right? And you can actually, I was with one of my colleagues, Anne Marie, and we were at an account about a year ago, and she walked in, and we'd never been in the account before, and they had a bottle of the single grain on the shelf, and she knew which batch it was based solely on the color, right? Because it was such a distinct color out of the batches that had come out recently. She knew which one it was, and that's what's, I think, really amazing about a product like Teeling single grain. It's doing a lot to sort of combat the bad rap that column distilled grain whiskey has in the whiskey community, right? A lot of single malt nerds, they hate grain whiskey, and they don't know why. They say, oh, no, I can't drink that garbage. They won't drink blended Scotch. They won't drink blended Irish whiskey. They only will drink things at cask strength. It's kind of this funny rhetoric. And I see it all the time at whiskey shows, and I'm sure you do too, Sam. And it's why I go into every show with no expectations, because you never know what's going to surprise you. I think this is one of those really surprising whiskeys. This is a beautiful example of what you can do with column distilled grain whiskey.
I was listening to my friend Sam Bracamontes, who works in Las Vegas in the hospitality sector. He works for a big drinks brand, a company that owns multiple brands, and he has this little show he does called He has this podcast he does called Corporate Entrepreneurs, and he was interviewing these three gentlemen from Scotland on his show, and they were talking about how, for Scotch whiskey at least, or whiskey in general, people swear it off after having one bad night going through their grandpa's drinks cabinet or their father's cabinet and pouring, like a glass full of a peated Scotch or something high proof, and they're not used to it.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our sister brands is Dewar's, right? And Dewar's is one of those legacy brands, is what I like to call it, because you get people coming up to you saying, "Oh yeah, that was my grandmother's drink, or that was my great grandfather's drink, or whatever it was." And they haven't tried it, or they had one experience when they were too young, and they're like, "Oh, what was that?" It's like, well, of course, the first experience you have with anything when you're too young and you shouldn't be drinking it. I mean, I grew up in Southern Arizona, and my dad ran a sheet metal shop, and his sheet metal guys were from Sonora, Mexico. And every year they would give them little plastic bottles of bathtub Bacanora, and my dad would graciously accept them, and they would go into the pantry and collect dust. And when I turned a certain age, being at a Baptist school, I was the one kid who had alcohol in his house, and so all the other kids are, "Oh man, what's this?" I'm like, "I don't know, it's in a plastic bottle." Yeah, my first experience was bathtub Bacanora in a plastic bottle. Like, I didn't touch the stuff for years, but it's, you gotta come back to it with an open mind.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to, otherwise, you're gonna leave some fantastic liquid behind. There are brands that I don't drink, not because I've had a bad experience with them, although we all had that experience with a certain Tennessee whiskey in college, or at least in high school. I know I did. But I mean, I love it now. But if you go at it from that point of view of, I tried it, I hated it, then okay. But if you go at it from the point of view of, I tried it, I got super wasted off of it, I was too young, I'll never have it again, you never know where your taste buds and your palate's going to change and develop over the years.
Well, I tell people, Sam, all the time, your palate changes every 7 years. So, and I use the Brussels sprout example. When kids are little, they can't stand Brussels sprouts, all that bitterness. And today, who doesn't love them, right? They're just so flavorful, so good, So give it another try if you didn't like something at the beginning.
I should also say right now that, you should be 21 and older to enjoy alcohol responsibly in the United States.
That goes without saying.
Everyone Drew,
on here, you are not 21. Why are you here? Oh. Unless you're from the UK and watch us from the UK, then you're 18 and you're okay.
Sure.
So I got a corkscrew. I share my studio space with my father, and he can hear me in the other room. So he came over and brought me a corkscrew. So thank you, Dad. And I managed to get the small batch open. My brain is not firing right today.
So what I really love about the small batch is that we do make small batches. It's not about making something taste the exact same every single time. It's about having a style. So if you look on that bottle there, Sam, there's actually a date of the batch. So you can see what batch date you're on.
This is 6/19.
6/19, yep. So for us, there are no rules when it comes to batching. Thank you, Drew. So when it comes to a batch, people can call everything small batch, but really what it is for us, it's 50 barrels or less. And we hand taste every single barrel. So that's how we can keep the consistency going. And as we're going, our master distiller, Alex, will say, "Oh, go get this barrel from this rack or that rack and bring them on in." And this is both a grain whiskey and a malt whiskey that comes in.
So real quick, Frank, I just want to jump back to the Brussels sprouts thing because Jason made a really interesting comment. He said they've been the subject of intense breeding in the last few decades as well. They really are less bitter and funky than they were when, I guess, you were a kid. But your point holds what he was saying.
And always go for the smaller ones. The smaller ones are less bitter than the big ones.
So, Frank, I'm going to jump back into Teeling now. And I'm sorry, guys, I do bounce around a lot. You answered a question before I had even a chance to ask it. Of how many barrels is in a small batch for Teeling? You said it's 50 or less.
That's correct, 50 or less. And that way we know we can taste every single barrel as it goes into the blend to make sure it's appropriate and it's right for that blend, to make sure our flavor profiles stay the same.
Raj asked, is that date only written on the small batch or is it written on other liquid as well?
The batches are on all the liquids. So like on our single malt, Raj, you'll see that it doesn't say we're at 10, at 12, and 18. It tells you the batch date. Because for us, it's not about just having a year on it. It's about the quality of the product that goes in that bottle. So Drew's is 4 of 15 for his single malt that he has on his shelf right now.
The single malt I have is 8 of 18.
Yeah, so, this is an old bottle that I found. This is when it used to be imported by a different company back in Teeling's early days. So I had to pick this one up off the shelf.
Oh wow!
It's kind of fun if you get multiple batches too. You can taste them side by side, and they'll really be very, very close. But there'll be subtle differences. That's one of the things that excites me about the whiskey is that it's about making great whiskey. And I always say we don't make great Irish whiskey. We don't. We make great whiskey in Ireland. All right. And that's why, you don't see us just do a 10, 12, 18. Every one of our whiskeys are different. The small batch is the cocktail whiskey. It's the Wednesday night whiskey for me. The single grain with the beer back, the single malt being one of the biggest luscious, and then the single pot. Oh my gosh, it's spicy and delicious. But so every one of our whiskeys are, what mood are you in for the night? To have some fun. And when people say, I love them all, I go, thanks for drinking. They go, I like this one better than that one. I go, thanks for tasting. Because it's fun to try the different things and see what you like.
Funny story about the batches, actually. So, we were talking to Alex Chasko one day, and he was talking about headaches that he's had in the process and things that he wouldn't do again, right? And we've become known by having the batches on there, and it's something that's important to us. And he remembers early in the company's history, they had some high-level folks come through, and he pulled this batch that he really loved. It was one of his absolute favorites. But it was older than the current release, and they asked him, they're like, well, why are you giving us the old stuff? We want the fresh stuff. And he was flabbergasted because he's like, no, this was my favorite batch of the last few batches. It's just so funny how much there's still a misperception even within folks that work in our industry, right? The general public, sometimes has problems with vintage dates on wine and batch dates and things, and they think it's a expiration date. I remember I used to work in a wine shop, and I had a lady call once, and she said she was really mad because I'd sold her husband expired wine, and I said, what are you talking about? And it was because it was last year's vintage, right? She's like, well, this is expired. You sold him expired wine.
Yeah, and I have friends that only drink 18-year-old whiskey or older, and I'm just like, then you're missing out on so many great whiskeys. Most people don't realize, bourbon is just a couple years old.
I've said for years that age only matters when you're a Scotch, and even then, it's not a guarantor of quality. I say it to all my friends on their birthdays when they're like, well, I feel old. I'm like, how old are you? They're like, too old. I'm like, age only matters when you're a Scotch, and even then, it's not a guarantor of quality. Right. Before we jump into the distillery tour, there's one question that I feel like a lot of people don't understand the answer of, and we'll be curious of how you have 24, 17, 18, etc. How you have such old whiskey if you guys were just started in the early to mid 2000s.
Well, Ireland's a magical place, so it's magic, right?
Yes. Why don't we tell the history of Irish whiskey, Drew, and then they can kind of get a feeling of it from there.
I think that's a great idea, Frank.
Gentlemen,
Sam, that's
please.
a fantastic segue into the distillery tour.
So you guys, Irish whiskey, up until a few things happened, was the #1 producing whiskey in the world. All right. So think about it, 60% of all whiskey in the world was Irish. And then a few things happened. First, they had prohibition. Father Matthews swore 1 in 3 Irishmen off of drinking spirits. He was a big fan of the brown stuff, that pint of the dark stuff. And then you had the coffee still, which is the column still that the Scots fell in love with, because you could, continually still all day, where the Irish were saying, no, we only triple distill. Then you have prohibition, and you have their fight for independence. So they lost all their channels.
Unrelated, but tangentially related side story, if I may, Frank, to cut you off here.
Yeah.
Sure.
A couple of years ago, when I was still newer in my whiskey journey, coffee still wasn't something I'd experienced much with. I heard it called column still, but there is a whiskey distilled. There's a whiskey brand from Japan that uses coffee in their name to describe the expression, but it's COFFEY. And I'd avoided it for so long because I thought that's a coffee whiskey. I don't like coffee. I'm not going to drink whiskey made from coffee.
You're not the only person who thought that, Sam. That's for sure.
No, I definitely working in bars that carried that particular whiskey. Plenty of people asked, well, does it have caffeine in it? I had to say, no, it's named after Aeneas Coffee, who invented the coffee still. And then they looked at me and they're like, wait, what? Okay, yeah. Oh well.
He was actual Irishman.
Exactly,
He was a taxman, and he invented it.
He was an excise taxman, yeah, which is why the Irish didn't want it. They're like, we don't trust you. You take our taxes.
Well, so let me put a point in here, because we're talking about Irish whiskey tonight. The Scots are, well, let's say they have a reputation for being frugal. We'll put it politely. They
do not like to spend a lot of money unless they have to.
And anything that's going to make the process of making whiskey more efficient, and stretch out the amount of whiskey that they're able to produce and sell, they are going to be all for. And so really that's why the coffee still took hold in Scotland in a way that it didn't in Ireland. It was all about efficiency, really. We can talk till we're blue in the face about the flavor differences between column distilled whiskey and pot distilled whiskey. Obviously Ireland is based on the flavor profile of pot distilled whiskey, and I love pot distilled whiskey, but I also love column distilled whiskey because that's bourbon, right? 95% of the bourbon that we drink are giant stills that you can see from 2 miles down the road. If we're drinking, Turkey or Beam or any of the big brands, you can see those stills from blocks and blocks away. And so we can't say that column stills are inherently bad for flavor. We have to leave that fight behind. But the Scots took to the coffee still, the column still, because it's efficiency. They were able to make more whiskey. They were able to make it quicker, and they were able to make it for cheaper.
So the industry, Sam, went from 204 distilleries, 37 in Dublin itself proper, to 1.5 distilleries in one person's lifetime. So think about that. In one person's lifetime, 204 to 1.5. And the half was Bushmills. That was made, they had 2 experimental stills up in Northern Ireland and Belfast. They were using a couple days a week. And the industry got consolidated because the farmer said, where are we going to sell our grain? We got to sell our grain somewhere. So the government said, all right, Jameson, Paddy, Powers, you guys are all going to go to Middleton to Irish distillers and distill there. So here are guys that have been competing against each other for hundreds of years now, distilling side by side. And so that was really it. And the last distillery in Dublin closed its doors in 1976 and moved down to Middleton. Well, in 1984, John Teeling, our dad, he went to Harvard Business School and got his doctorate in Irish whiskey.
Wait, that's a thing?
That's a thing. Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah. So he got his doctorate in Irish whiskey.
What am I doing with my life?
And how to rise it again.
Well,
And
Sam, you can get a doctorate in pretty much anything as long as you can get a professor to sign off on your thesis.
That's correct.
So you just have to, convince them that it's a worthwhile study and find the right department and the right, kook that will sponsor you essentially. And then you have to pay them tens of thousands of dollars to, get the right to put the little diploma up on your wall.
Yeah. So Sam, after he got his doctorate in whiskey, he came back in '87 to Ireland, and he bought Cooley and Kilbeggan Distillery. And that's right on the border of Northern Ireland. Everyone's all, "You're nuts. What are you doing? There's, bombings going on, all this stuff." And he's all, no, the Irish like to drink. They'll leave us alone. And they did. So now as that went through, the reason we have these old whiskeys is because Jack and Stephen and their dad, John, were making whiskey there. And then along came Beam, who wanted to sell to Suntory. And they said, "Hey, we want to buy you guys." So the family sold to them, but the boys said, "We're not done yet." And they took tens of thousands of barrels along with them to what is now Teeling. And that's how we have those old whiskeys.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was incredible foresight on, Jack and Stephen's part to, negotiate for that family stock, right? This was, their birthright as they saw it. Well, sorry, what was that, Sam?
I said it's brilliant. It's genius to done that.
And then the other part of that, the big two parts was finding a guy like Alex Chaskow that they could partner with that has this brilliant mind. That the guy he studied whiskey in Scotland. Some of the experiments that he got to do, it's just fascinating to listen to him talk. If you ever see him log on to a live session somewhere, I highly recommend signing on, because the guy just has fascinating stories. But Jack and Stephen brought Alex on. He was employee number one, and he was able to bring his vision. And so it was taking that family stock and then applying secondary maturation and new different techniques and things that we could do while we were building this distillery. And then as the distillery was built, now new techniques in making whiskey in Dublin. We'll get to taste the pot still and the black pits made on our stills in Dublin at the Teeling Distillery. It's carrying on that family legacy that their father started, and then the boys are really taking to the next golden era.
So I'm really excited to get into the pot still and the black pits, but I really want to get us started on the distillery tour, because otherwise I will just keep asking you guys questions the entire 3 hours, and we're not going to get to taste the fun stuff.
Well, let's do it. Let's get into the distillery tour.
So for those of you following along at home, Teeling is one of the only distilleries to have this available to be used to show public-facing, consumer-facing. There are other brands that have it, but unfortunately we can't use it to show to you guys what it looks like, and we can't go over the process through their virtual distillery. Now, again, so we're the only one, but they're one of the only ones.
With that in mind, if any of you, Frank and I will put our contact information, up at the end. If any of you ever want us to do, private tour or class with your whiskey groups, in your workplace, you want to do a Zoom happy hour, things like that, we're available. We love talking whiskey, and it's certainly better than doing PowerPoints and Excel documents. So anytime that I can get on and talk with y'all, I can justify to my bosses, oh, well, I can't get to that expense report because I was talking whiskey for 3 hours.
Is it coming up, you guys? Can you see if it's coming up?
I see a screen that looks like a lot of versions of our screen.
All right, let's get out of that. Sorry, you guys. Let's try this again.
Please stand by. Technical difficulties.
That was like one of those funhouse mirrors where you
stand
and it just goes on infinitely.
or like just holding a mirror up to a mirror.
Yeah.
It says StreamYard is sharing the screen. Is it sharing, you guys?
Yeah, give me 1 second, Frank. I gotta add it up to the screen. There we go.
Oh.
There we go.
All right, good. So you guys, we're going to head to Dublin, Ireland, and as we get started here, there's one thing I want you to do is I want you to take a deep breath in, and you know that when it first rain of the year, and you have that beautiful smell of that cut grass and everything, that's the smell of Ireland. And I want you to see this beautiful blue sky that's up here. I think they photoshopped this in because Ireland is not that beautiful color. It is more gray than it is that. So, Drew, you want to tell them a little about the distillery?
Yeah. So, we're going to talk a lot today. Tell you some stories. We've already started telling you some stories. Usually, we do that, inside the distillery here. But you can see this is our home. This is the house that Jack and Stephen built with the help of Alex. It was a distillery designed to be a working distillery that we can take folks on tours through. So if you're ever in Ireland, we welcome you to come visit us. If you're in Dublin, it's really easy to find us, even if you're maybe a couple sheets to the wind, because all the pubs have these big black barrels out front, like you can see that Frank's pointing to there. And the lucky thing about those barrels is that on the top of them is usually a little map chalked in white. And so it tells you where the distillery is in relation to where you are in Dublin. Just follow the river, follow the signs to Christchurch, and we're another block or two down. But you'll walk into the distillery here. You'll see this beautiful architecture. We worked with a firm that really wanted to incorporate as much of the barrel into the design. It's one of those things that barrels in our warehouses, they can live for 30, 40, 50, 70, 100 years, right? We will keep using a barrel until it is no longer good. We'll send barrels back to the cooper to scrape them out and rechar them on the inside. Everyone in whiskey uses barrels until they can't hold liquid. And then when they can't hold liquid, we still want to use them. So you'll see them incorporated there into the back wall behind the reception desk. This is where you'll pick your tour, decide which tasting you want to have. It's one tour, but the tastings are different. You can add a couple of extra drams in the Bang Bang bar to your tab here at the base. If you just want to pop in for a sandwich and a cup of coffee, this distillery was really designed to be a community center. Teeling is known as the Spirit of Dublin, and it's known as the Spirit of Dublin not just because we're the first distillery to be reborn in over 125 years in the city of Dublin, but really because we want to be a part of the fabric of the community. Our logo there is the phoenix rising from the pot still in the vapor there. Of course, the regular phoenix rises from the ashes, but we're not lighting wood fires in the distillery anymore. We've moved on to a more technical way to do that. But this is where we start in the distillery, and we'll go into the museum here in a moment.
Yeah, and then also, you guys, the one thing to think of is when Jack and Stephen went to build this distillery, they could have gone anywhere in Ireland and built for 10 times less money than what they did by going back to Dublin. But they knew Dublin is the spiritual home of whiskey. Their family, you'll see 1782 was distilling in Dublin until that downfall when they went away there too. So they wanted to bring it back, and that's part of that Phoenix Rising, bringing it back up. And this whole area that we're in, the Dublin 8, it was a depressed area. They were in the middle of a recession at the time, and they wanted to put something in that could be a community focus, and that's why they put the cafe. And you'll see moms groups having coffee, and grandmas in here having a little sip throughout the time too.
So you'll see more barrel staves and pieces of wood here as we come into the distillery. But this is great. When you're going on the actual distillery tour, you'll have a few minutes to yourself down here in the museum before we get onto the tour. It's when you're able to see all of these history displays that'll walk you through some of the stories that Frank and I have already said, but we're going to highlight a few of these for you. So we're in what's known as the Golden Triangle. Golden Triangle is this area where everything was happening in the industrial part of Dublin, and you know, it's important to remember that when you were making whiskey a couple of hundred years ago, you needed to either be next to where the grain was being grown, or you needed to be next to a transportation hub, so either a railroad or a river. In this case, you have a river that goes right through the heart of Dublin. And so that's why all of this industry was popping up there. That's why whiskey was so prevalent in downtown Dublin. You were able to bring malted barley, and you were able to bring wheat or other grains in from the countryside, and then process that here at the mills, and then take it from the mills to the distilleries and start making beer, and then start making whiskey. And so that's why it was all happening. As Frank mentioned earlier, there was a time in Ireland, there was a time in the world when Irish whiskey was the whiskey of the world, and we'll look at that as we come in here to this area. This was known as the Liberties. It was called the Liberties because, well, people were taking some liberties there, and you can see that section of the old wall. Dublin was a walled city. Walls were important for protection, and what happened outside of the walls was usually the things that were maybe not as above board. So distilling happened here, tanning happened here, maybe some illegal things happened here. You could find some company for the night or do other things, maybe some gambling. But this is where we are. We're in the heart of the Liberties. This is where Irish whiskey and whiskey, starts to get its foothold in Ireland.
And Ireland was really the first to use different barrel finishes, because the barrel was the cardboard box for millennia, if you think about it. So when they would bring the ports, the Madeiras, the wines in, once they were empty, you didn't have glass bottles back then. You would fill up a ceramic jug. They just throw the barrel away. And so everyone making whiskey says, wait a minute, hey, this holds the whiskey, and look how it changes. It's so good. And that's why they started using the barrels too.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to taste those herring barrel whiskeys that they were making back in the day. You have to remember, not everything in a barrel was good. There were pickle barrels, fish barrels, molasses barrels, of course, wine and sherry barrels. Some of those barrels may not have been great for whiskey, but we also, going back to that discussion, the debate about the Irish or the Scots who made whiskey first, we have to remember that the whiskey that they were making was real rough stuff. In the 1400s, before they figured out barrel aging, before they figured out, how to kind of tame the spirit, it was mostly medicinal, and lots of herbs and things went into it to try to make it palatable. But, luckily we're beyond that.
They stored rusty nails in a barrel.
Well, what was that?
I said I would not be surprised if rusty nails got stored in the barrels.
Yeah, I'm sure all kinds of things. And then they're like, oh, we'll use this for whiskey now. Well, speaking of that, you can see that great whiskey fire there. This is a sad day in Irish whiskey history. And one of the reasons that in addition to Prohibition, and in addition to Irish independence and American Prohibition and temperance and all of those things that really helped to hasten on the demise of Irish whiskey, there was a huge fire in Dublin, caused by the storing of whiskey, and the streets ran wet with whiskey, and flaming whiskey, and then people started drinking it, and then they started dying. It wasn't because of the whiskey. It was because of the contamination of everything else that was in the streets in Victorian Dublin, right? You've got horse-drawn carriages and horses in the street, so you can imagine what's in the street. And plumbing isn't what it was today, and so unfortunately, a few folks died drinking that street whiskey. And just one of the sad stories about Dublin whiskey on its way out. At one point, Dublin whiskey was so popular that, and of course, you have to take this story with a grain of salt, because someone out there will probably, tell me I'm lying. But, the E in whiskey for Irish whiskey, really traces its history, back to the fact that Dublin whiskey was so popular around the world. Queen Victoria loved it herself. It was her favorite whiskey. It was the most exported whiskey. It was everywhere. The E was added, and the bottle shape was changed so that there would be a provenance to the whiskey coming out of Dublin. And then everyone else around Ireland started saying, oh, well, that Dublin whiskey's starting to get, picked up, and we need to hitch our wagon to that. And, it's just like champagne can only be made in Champagne, France. Anyone in California has to call it, sparkling wine. And of course, there's some folks that, contend that that's not quite how the E got into whiskey. And they'll tell you that maybe it's because the Irish like to be contrarian. But I really think, we've got some history on our side looking at when that E first started to develop, was around the same time that the Dublin whiskey rose to prominence.
Did you see this comment, Drew?
I can't see any comments come up, you guys.
That's
David
good.
Stewart said, you know what they called the Irish whiskey that ran down the street and picked up all the contaminants? Scotch.
Oh,
Good job, Dave.
Yeah. So a little bit of a fun bar game that you guys can play with your friends now with the E and Irish whiskey is you can tell the heritage of your bourbon. So when you're in a bar, if you see like a Jack Daniel's whiskey, it's EY, Daniel's being Irish. If you see Maker's Mark, it's just a Y. And the Samuelson families are Scots. So you can tell the heritage by how they spell their name, whiskey, onto the label. So it's a good way to win yourself a free drink when you're inside.
Now, of course, some folks, changed that at some point. Like our friend Elijah Craig is, originally family from the town of Craigellachie, which whiskey near and dear to my heart is made in Speyside in Scotland. But he changed the way he spelled it to match the rest of the Americans because wanted to fit in, whatever. So when you're here in the distillery, you get to see some there's this history timeline. I really like this area here that Frank's going to take us into with some of the different bottles and different bits of kind of arcana that you get to see. These are some of the Dublin bottles, right? So in addition to adding E to the name, Dublin had its own glass blowers, and they decided that they were going to make a distinct shape. And so that Dublin whiskey bottle is a shape that we revived with our Teeling bottle. It's something that we wanted to bring back and show off with the squat shoulders and that nice kind of rounded edge to it. It was different than the bottles being made in Scotland. It was different than the bottles for country whiskey. Dublin whiskey was a refined whiskey. It was a whiskey of court. It was a whiskey of traders. It was a whiskey of merchants. It unfortunately fell on hard times and almost disappeared. We really do have to thank our friends over at Middleton Distillery for saving the category. Jameson is the category leader because it was the only thing for a very long time, right? And that's most people's familiarity with Irish whiskey. It was this category that you looked at and you're like, okay, well, we've got Jameson and we've got Bushmills and then we've got some other stuff that I think Jameson makes, and you're like, I don't know, it's all kind of the same. And then John Teeling came around and decided that he wanted to start this renaissance. And then you can see the picture there of Jack and Stephen, and they like I said earlier, they weren't finished when it was time to sell the distillery, and so that's how we get to where we are here. I think that's about it for the museum. The last little slide there that you see is this slide on innovation, and we're going to get to talk a lot about that as we get into the distillery. Alex Chaskow, our master distiller, like I said, the guy's a crazy mad scientist. We'll get to look at the all the innovative things. Oh, Frank, you didn't get to show him your favorite Game of Thrones chair.
Oh, yes. It's a chair that actually fits me, so it's a great chair.
Frank, I don't think anyone except me and Drew and maybe a few of your friends in the comments understand why that's funny.
Yeah. My nickname is Big Frank, but my mom always said they call you Big because you wear an 8 1/4 hat and a 17 shoe. It couldn't be the 360 pounds in between, right? So I'm not the smallest person on the block. So when you guys head over there, by the way, if you're going over, get a hold of Drew or myself or Sam, and we will help set you guys up with the best tour of the distillery possible.
Now, my big question before we move on is I want to know what I'm supposed to pour next so I can drink along with the tour. And what should our viewers at home be pouring to drink along with us as we go through this next section?
Well, we've tasted small batch, we've tasted the single grain. I think single malt would be next up. Usually we taste that when we get into the room talking about maturation, but I think now's as good a time as any.
Maturation room then.
Well, I don't want you to go thirsty.
I still have a little bit of a small batch left. I'm okay.
Okay, cool.
All right, now before we head in here, you guys, now I want you again to kind of get an idea of what this feels like. So outside, we smelt that rain of Ireland. Right now, it's loud, it's noisy, it's hot, and it smells amazing. You're going to have fermentation going on, distillation going on in here. It's really, the senses are just so opened up when you come through here. And
sorry, Frank, just a quick shout out to our friend and their colleague, Gareth Howells. He's actually joining me end of month for a talk on some of the single malts in the Bacardi whiskey portfolio, but he just said Scotch.
Well, Gareth is a man of, few words sometimes, but those words are, important and tasty. I think actually, Sam, the last time I saw Gareth live and in person was one of the last times I saw you at Whiskey Fest in San Francisco.
Oh wow, yeah.
That was a night, wasn't it?
No comment.
Well, what Sam isn't telling you there, we like to make sure that he takes some samples home. So whiskey fests for a whiskey professional sometimes a dangerous situation. So we'll just leave it at that.
You did what? No, I didn't take anything home.
No. Samples. We get you samples.
I didn't get anything to take home with me though.
All right. So as we head through, you'll see that
I think
the whole distillery is open, so you can see everything that it needs to become a great spirit.
All right, so we're now in the distillery. You're going to see everything except for that, that painted section there. This is grain storage. This is offsite because it's big and it's ugly, and frankly, doesn't fit into the footprint of the room that we're in, which is fine. But one of the things that we were talking about with Alex was innovation, right? This is a distillery that he built from the ground up. He, got to decide every little thing. And so it was Jack and Stephen and Alex together that made the decisions. And what's cool about it is that they were figuring out, hey, we want to be able to make whiskey that we can think about today and that we can guess what we want to make, but we also want to be able to make whiskey we've never thought of. And I think that's one of the coolest things. And it really starts here with the mill. This is a wet mill. Most distillery tours you've ever been on, you probably didn't get to see the mill, or if you did, you had to put your cameras away because there's a fire hazard. You've got a lot of grain dust in the air, and if a pebble that didn't get sorted properly hits that wheel, it could spark a fire and then catch the dust in the air, and the whole thing goes kaboom. But we figured that out by having a wet mill. We can do a lot of different things. A, we can have the mill here in the distillery with everything else, but B, we can do different types of grain. We can put crystal rye into this thing. Most importantly, though, we can put malted and unmalted barley in there. And that's what's really the distinct Irish style. This is probably a good chance to drink the next whiskey, Sam. If you want to get that pot still, this is This is the distinct Irish style, right? Pot still whiskey, separate from anything else that you can get anywhere else. Yes, there are pot stilled whiskeys made in other places, but the category in Ireland is very specific. It is a blending of malted and unmalted barley. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the malting process, the easiest way to think of it, it's kind of like roasting coffee beans. If you or I were going to start our morning with a cup of coffee, we're probably not starting with a green, unroasted coffee bean. We're starting with a bean that's been roasted either full city all the way to, dark, roast, and they're going to change the flavor profile. In the malting process, we're tricking the grain into thinking it's spring. It's starting to germinate. It's starting to have a conversion of starches and sugars to give, our yeast something to eat when it gets into that beer making process. Yeast love sugar. Why would you use unmalted barley? Well, the Irish, in their fight against the tyrannical Brits, decided that, unmalted barley is taxed at a different rate than malted barley. And so, damned if it's harder to use, we're still going to use some of it because, we don't have to pay as much tax to the Brits. And still to this day, that's what the form is. It's a blend of unmalted and malted barley. And what I think is so interesting about this whiskey, Sam, when you taste it, is the unmalted barley gives a spiciness to the whiskey in a way that malted barley does not give off, right? There's a sweetness to malted barley, and unmalted barley has this earthy dimension to it. It's got this spice, baking spice, maybe a little Szechuan peppercorn. And it's the blending of those two things together that really create this unique flavor that is so distinctly Ireland.
And it's the first single pot to be made out of Dublin in almost 50 years.
Ooh. Yeah, what's cool about this whiskey, you've probably had a single pot still from other distilleries that have an age statement on it, and it might be a very old age statement for some of those. We're a young distillery, right? We've been making juice off the still since 2015. And so, we're in 2020 now. The oldest whiskey that we've made, on property is about 5 years old. So, this is a young pot still whiskey. It's feisty. It's fiery. It's got some bite to it.
Hey, Frank, why don't we pause the tour here for a second? I'm going to refocus it back to the three of us.
Okay.
And let's talk a little bit more about this pot still, because Jason even said it in the comments. He said, I love that pot still spice. And that is 100% what I am getting. I am getting baking spices. I am getting pepper and peppercorn. I am getting, freshly ground black pepper. But I'm also getting, caramel, as well as sugars. Our friend Una's in the chat, and she said it reminds her of creme brulee.
Yeah, and I think all those descriptors are right. They're all really good descriptors. They're wonderful flavors. It's something that's really unique. If someone's a rye drinker, when they try the single pot, they're like, wow, this is, it's even, more unique than a ryes are going to be. And it's ours, especially because we're 46 alcohol, because we don't chill filter anything, gives you that extra kick. And I like to drop a little bit of water into this one just to keep blooming and opening it up as you're drinking along.
I have my soda water. It'll work.
It's funny. The water is one of the biggest debates that we see at whiskey shows or anything, right? People asking, well, how the heck should I drink this whiskey? And Frank and I always answer, drink it however the heck you want to drink it, right? Yeah. I like this whiskey, as is. But I've had it with a little bit of water from time to time, and it does. It really opens things up in a different way. It's interesting when you talk to chemical engineers, when you talk to folks that have masters in distillation science, and you ask them about what's going on with water in whiskey, and when you talk about these things, there's only so much that we actually know, right? We understand that there are compounds in the whiskey that are hydrophobic, and so you lose them as the water sort of pushes them to the side. There are compounds in the whiskey that like the water and pull close to it, and so sometimes when I add water, I lose some of the kind of the top tier and the bottom tier. So some of those high ethyl alcohol, bright white flower notes get lost for me, but then sometimes some of those fusel notes get lost too, right? Some of the things that could almost be a little bit of a flaw. those darker, brown notes, and then I'm able to really concentrate in on the core of what that whiskey. That's what I like water for, is concentrating on that core, and I can dig into the fruits and everything that makes up the heart of that whiskey.
I say this every time. The internet here.
Oh, we lost Sam. Well, I can see in the comments, Frank, someone's asking about the thing you take off of your whiskey glass. They're asking about your whiskey hat.
Oh, yes, it's a little watch glass. And what it is so you can put your fingers on top, give it a twirl, and then it's just, instead of sticking your nose right into the glass where it's filled with alcohol, you just smell the top, and you get all those wonderful aromas. And you can get them for a buck and a half on the internet. It's a great little watch glass that goes on top. And you'll see them in the distilleries when they're tasting things. You can leave it in. You'll see, I'll have whiskeys at my desk for days or weeks on a time that I keep tasting all the way down. And I just want to see how they change.
I see a note here from Jason as well. It says, I do like a bit of age on my pot still. If I'm being honest, which, Jason, what's fantastic about that is, we're not releasing everything that we're making, right? We've got beautiful warehouses that's holding whiskey. And so as our whiskey ages, we'll be able to put out older and older whiskeys. This pot still will, remain a blend of, younger fiery whiskeys, because that's what we have and that's what we like. But there's certainly at Alex's disposal lots of amazing, incredible whiskeys. And with every year, he's got another year of whiskey under his belt to start playing with.
And Jason, we have over 100 different barrel types and 7 geniuses of wood in the warehouse that we're experimenting with. So we'll see what it comes out down the road, with the flavor profiles and everything like that. Because we are young, we're growing, and we want you guys to grow with us. So when you go out there and you talk to your friends about drinking Teeling, let them know that, hey, you're in on the bottom floor. You're right here with the beginning with everybody else, finding out about this great spirit, and have some fun and help us out, help us build this brand. I have 2 hands, and with your 2 hands, now it's 4, and we keep those going out. Become our ambassador for us out there.
I make 6, my friend.
All right, so he's back. So should we start with the lauter tun? Can you guys see the lauter tun?
We can't yet, Frank. I have to full screen the screen share again. But before we do, I want to talk about the mash on the pot still.
Because sure, absolutely.
30-30 minimum malted and unmalted is what it legally states. But obviously, very few quality Irish whiskeys are doing the bare minimum 30-30. So what is the mash for Teeling's pot still?
It's an even split.
50-50.
So we're 50-50 unmalted and malted barley. We see that Alex has obviously experimented and tasted a lot of things, and likes what that even split does. It creates a balance in the whiskey. I think when we're talking about these notes, and Una gets a note of creme brulee, and you get a note of peppercorn, there's this kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde to this whiskey. And I think Alex has done that on purpose, right? You're getting to get these, there's this duality in this whiskey that not a lot of other whiskeys can accomplish. I think the other thing that we haven't talked about yet that contributes to this is some of its maturation. So we're using 3 different cask types here. It's a blend of virgin American oak, ex-bourbon, and ex-sherry casks. And so this is bringing in kind of the best of all of these worlds. Oh, just lost one of my earbuds. I still have one, so we're good. I got so animated about virgin American oak. So we know virgin American oak from bourbon, right? It does all of these crazy things to young whiskeys to mellow them out, to change them, to add caramel and butterscotch and toffee and all those deep kind of baking spice notes that come along with virgin American oak. The vanilla compound, scientifically speaking, is just it's there. You can lick the barrel and you can taste it. But ex-bourbon, you're not getting as much of that. There's a different sort of thing. It's like the difference of searing a steak or not, right? That Maillard process and searing the steak gives you a completely different flavor. And so the virgin American oak to the ex-bourbon, yes, these are similar casks, but they're at different points of their life. And then of course, sherry we've tasted, across lots of different whiskeys, and it always does the same thing. It brings that Christmas cake, marzipan, almond, beautiful nuttiness, roundness to the whiskey, a little bit of sweetness. I think it helps temper some of the spicier kind of rambunctious notes of the unmalted barley. And I think Alex has done a great job of picking out 3 woods that are going to show off very unique characteristics of this whiskey.
So, Drew, Raj asked, when you mean ex-sherry, are you referring to Oloroso or PX or something else?
So when I refer to ex-sherry generically, what that refers to is Oloroso shipping casks. So in our warehouse, we have ex-sherry that's going to range, run the gamut, right? Alex travels the world and he gets to, pick up all kinds of crazy things. He picked up chestnut casks from a sherry bodega that used to age wine that they made from the pomace, brandy that they made from the pomace of the sherry production. So he finds all kinds of things. But, there's this dirty little secret in the whiskey world. We talk a lot about sherry. And one of our friends over in Speyside, they make more sherry than a couple of sherry bodegas combined. And for a long time, they helped to kind of keep this myth going, right? The 1970s, the rules changed, and all of the sherry that was being shipped over to the UK had to be in bottles all of a sudden. And so decades and decades, or really, a couple century worth of tradition of shipping sherry from Europe to the UK in barrels ended. And the reason there were so many sherry barrels, before the 1970s, is because once the barrel went over there, well, the folks in Europe and Spain, they didn't want it anymore, right? And so the Scots raised their hand and said, well, we'll take those because they're cheap. And the Irish raised their hand and said, yeah, we'll take them because, if the Scots are doing it, we want to beat them at their game. But in the 1970s, the laws changed and all the sherry had to be shipped in bottles. And so overnight, the industry changed in whiskey and there weren't as many barrels around. And so something had to be done. And what was created in this vacuum was this seasoning cask process. And I think there's a lot more transparency now. I went on a tour at Macallan, and they're very transparent about the seasoning cask and the fact that it's not bodega sherry. It's not casks coming out of the Solera system. The casks in the Solera system are precious, just precious to that bodega. Yeah. They will keep them for 100 years. They'll keep them for as long as they possibly can, leaks and all. They don't care, right? Because the flavor of that sherry has been created by that cask and those casks in their Solera system. And so the only time we get Solera casks are honestly when a bodega goes belly up. Or they want to reduce the size of their operation, right? A father, passes down his bodega to, his 2 kids, and the daughter wants to keep running the operation, and the son wants to get out of the business. Well, half the casks have to go up for sale. And, usually that's where guys like Alex come in and buy those casks. And so when we talk about sherry in whiskey, if we're not specifically naming the sherry, if we're not saying, Palo Cortado or Pedro Jimenez, then you have to assume that's an Oloroso transport cask. It's a seasoned cask. And what ends up happening is these seasoned casks, sherry lives in them for anywhere from 6 months to about 2 years, and then gets dumped out. And that sherry isn't even really sherry. It gets used for bulk production for brandy. It can get used for bulk production for sherry vinegar. It can get used for... Sorry, I ran out of water here. It can be used for, lots of different things, but, it's not the kind of sherry that you're getting from Lustau in a glass, right? And so when we say sherry and we don't call out a specific cask, it's these Oloroso style, casks. But don't get me wrong, we've got PX. We've got all the different things in our warehouse. I've got a bottle of PX behind me, 14-year-old single malt that lived its entire life in an ex-PX cask, and it is like raisin cake. It is incredible.
That sounds amazing. Some of the commenters, they're talking about the chestnut cask, which is actually one of the only chilies I've never been able to get my hands on. I've never tried. David says he's got the October 2005 chestnut, number 29555, was it? Yep, 29555. Tony Cappuccilli saying he just tried the chestnut, or he tried the chestnut, but the 16-year Calvados, he tried it for the first time. It's amazing. Jason saying he doesn't see many of the special casks in his part of the world. Jason, you're in Kansas, I believe, right? Otherwise he'd buy more, but everyone's talking about, some of these special cask releases. Can you give us a sneak preview before we go back on the tour of what's coming next?
Frank, do you want to talk about some of the things that you spotted with your eagle eye in the warehouse?
Oh, geez. There's all types of sherries. There's hardwoods. There's, Japanese woods, Brazilian hardwoods that are there. And what it is they're going to, determine when the barrel's ready, they're going to come out with them. So like today, one of the next things is the Black Pit, Sam, that will be coming out. And for the gentleman in Kansas, you could go to a Reserve Bar and get yourself a bottle off a Reserve Bar today. It released in Northern California yesterday or the day before. In Southern California, it releases on the 22nd. So it'll be here momentarily here in California. It won't be it'll be California, Chicago, New York, and Florida is where it's landing, I believe.
You hear that, guys? For the first time ever, I got a bottle before it hits market, technically, sort of.
Well, Sam, you have a bottle before I have a bottle. So, yeah.
Now, how is that possible?
Well, Sam, you have my bottle. So,
yes.
Frank and I are just having to pretend to taste along with you today. If I would have been smart, I would have taken a couple of drams out of the top of it for us before I, plopped it in the mail for you. But,
That's how much we like you, Sam.
Next time, you get the full bottle to yourself.
All right, Frank, I'm going to full screen your tour again. Let's get back into it.
All right, so here we're at the Louder Tun, you guys. This is where you're making your beer. So when you're over here in the mill, think about it like this. Like when you're making a French press pot of coffee, if you just put whole beans in, you get coffee water. If you really grind them up, you get that espresso kind of a thing. So we're able to control the grind, the grist that's coming through, and then we put it into here with hot water, and this is where we're going to extract and make our wort for it as we get going. And then we're going to take it over here to our fermenters. And before I have Drew tell you guys about the fermentation techniques and things that we use, I want you to think about this. Again, it would be loud, it'd be hot. The aromas are really overwhelming in many ways. And if you come up to these Douglas fir, these pine barrels here, you can see the fermentation taking place in here. It's going to have a yogurt smell, vanilla yogurt. If you put your nose over it and breathe in, it'll actually drop you back because the CO2 that's rising will hit you almost like a wasabi. The smell right now is so delicious. It's just unbelievable. So Drew, why don't you tell them about fermentation?
Yeah, so this is my favorite spot. The fermentation is incredible. It's proof that either God really loves us or science really figured something out for us. Whatever you want to believe. But the fact that these little yeast, their only job in life, the only thing that they want to do is eat and reproduce. In the eating and the reproducing, they're eating all those sugars. They're creating more of themselves. They're eating more sugar. And the byproduct of that, of course, is just alcohol, a little bit of CO2 and heat, also byproduct of yeast. But this is the simple basics of it, right? Anything with a fermentable sugar can be turned into alcohol. Grapes, grain, potatoes, jalapenos, anything that's got some sugar in it, you could conceivably ferment. And so This is my favorite spot in the distillery. It's if you're ever on a distillery tour and you get to put your hand down in the fermentation tank and taste what's going on. That's always an interesting thing because you can kind of see where it's at in fermentation, and so much happens in those hours. We know that in the UK, fermentation roughly takes about 45, 50 hours to wrap up its process. And you can see we've got two different types of fermentation tanks here. So we're able to start the process in these, Douglas fir, this Oregon pine. This is the more traditional way, this, older style of fermentation tank. It allows for different flavors to, kind of come about. It's open top, so you have some ambient yeast as well as the distiller's yeast and the white wine yeast that Alex has picked to use. It's really cool. First time I went to Scotland, I raised my hand at the distillery and I said, "Hey, so what kind of yeast are you using?" And they all just looked at me like I was crazy because my only distillery tours were in Mexico and in America, and in Kentucky. Obviously, you've got your yeast strain under lock and key, and you've got if you're Four Roses, you've got several different yeast strains, and you're very proud of them. And if you're Jack Daniels, you've got one guy whose whole job is just making sure that yeast stays alive for 170 years. And I raised my hand in Scotland, and they say, "Well, we use the same yeast that our neighbors use." I said, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, we've got distiller's yeast and we've got brewer's yeast, and if we run out, our friends down the street can give us some more." And I said, "That's just nuts." So Alex is bucking the trend here a little bit, by adding in this South African white wine yeast. It creates a lot of these high-toned fruit notes in the initial fermentation, right? He picked it because it brings something else to the table that distiller's yeast isn't able to do. The Scots are all about efficiency, as we've already talked about, and the efficiency comes from them wanting to save a couple of bucks. And so, the yeast that they use are the ones that are going to do the job the quickest. We don't care as much about doing the job the quickest. We want the best fermentation to happen. We want the most complex flavors so that when we're done with fermentation, after that first 24 hours in these wooden fermentation tanks, we're able to send them back to the stainless steel fermenters where it's able to, finish up its fermentation. And this is able to create kind of the best of both worlds, right? You've got this old school process and you've got this new technological approach, and both of them are contributing flavor to the whiskey.
And one of the cool things about Alex Chasko, you guys, just to give you a little bit of his background, is when you hear his accent, it's kind of hard to understand him because he is from Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And so we are using Oregon pine here. He doesn't come with the mindset of this is what whiskey has to be. He comes out of the craft brewing industry. He worked at Bridgeport, who started the West Coast IPA, and at Pyramid before he went to Harriet Watt to get his master's in distilling. So when we say he's our master distiller, he truly is a master distiller. And one of the great things about Alex is, coming with that craft beer background of, hey, it doesn't have to be made just this way and this way only. He tries all kinds of things. And that's how we end up here with, the wooden vats, the white wine yeast, stainless steel, the distiller's yeast. All those steps take a lot more time and a lot more effort. But it really gives you what's in the glass, because we can't compete with the Jamesons of the world, right? They're the biggest whiskey house in Ireland, and they have an ocean of whiskey laid down. We have somebody's backyard swimming pool, if you want to give an idea. They do over 850 times more whiskey a day than we can produce at our max. And, and we're proud to be part of this Irish whiskey. I love Jameson, and I love what they do for the category. So the way we're going to compete is by what we put into that bottle, and it's all off of flavor, and that's why we do these things here.
So we're going to Helen's question. I had to run away for a quick second. I just want to make sure, did Helen's question about yeast strains get answered?
Oh, I think I touched on it a little bit, but I can dive in. I didn't see that she'd asked. Really, again, it comes down to yeast are incredibly complex things, and they create different flavors. They have sort of a signature. And the reason when you go to, Kentucky and they say that they have all these different yeast strains that they use, is because the distiller and the team, I'm going to use Four Roses again as an example, because I think this is one of the, best known examples that have a variety of yeast strains, and you can taste through the yeast strains and the different mash bills and get to taste different whiskeys, right? And so they believe very firmly that each of these yeasts create different flavored whiskeys. And then those whiskeys are going to, change obviously as they mature in cask. In Scotland, the reason why, almost everyone uses the same yeast, there's kind of a staid way that the Scots do things, right? They don't want to buck traditions, and innovation comes very slowly in Scotland. Innovation it's scary for one, because you don't know if you messed up until 12, 15 years down the road, right? If you're doing something really good, and then you change things, you really don't even know until you hit 6, 7, 8, 9 years in the barrel before you figure it out. I think one of my favorite stories, our friends over at Dalwhinnie, they decided they were going to rip their worm tubs out, right? And this is after your stills, you've got to condense the spirit back down to liquid from vapor, and so there's a couple of ways you can do that. Most everyone uses these big kind of condenser units that are real easy. They plug into the wall, but the old-fashioned way of doing it was with something called a worm tub. It's a giant tank of cold water from the river, and it's got this copper tube that worms its way down it, and it's super old school. It's a pain in the butt to maintain. And so Dalwhinnie removed their worm tubs, and they said, "Oh, it's not going to change the flavor." And about 6 years later, and at a very big expense to the distillery, they had to have new worm tubs created because the old ones had already been scrapped and put back in, right? Because that's what changing that one thing did. And so the Scots are definitely a little hesitant to try new things. And I think that's what, sets us apart. I think that's what Irish whiskey is so amazing. It's just, it's a different category. It's a different beast. And Alex is all about innovation. And so the two different yeast strains, it really is because they're going to contribute different things. That white wine yeast strain is contributing high floral notes. It's contributing tropical fruit. When you taste the tropical fruit, that comes through on the small batch, I honestly think, some of that is from the white wine yeast, right? Versus the distiller's yeast. Distiller's yeast is, it's efficient. It's standard. It does the job. It gets the bulk of the process done. And so these two things are it's the back and forth. Again, the reason why we have the wooden fermentation tanks and the metal, so we can get a little bit of that old world and a little bit of that new.
And Helen, too, on the idea for me is, if you want to break down Scotch versus Irish whiskey to the simplest terms possible, Scotch whiskey to me is very cereal or grain forward. Irish whiskey is very fruity, and that's because of the climate and the Atlantic and how it all affects the islands that they're on. So by using that white wine yeast, we're able to bring out that fruitiness that's in that whiskey and really make it prevalent for folks as they're trying it. And that sets us apart.
Helen, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking.
So I think, if my favorite part of the tour is those fermentation tanks, I'll let Frank talk about our stills, because I know this is his favorite part of the tour. These are his babies. I mean, they're Jack's daughters, but they're Frank's babies too.
Yeah, so they're actually named after Jack's daughters, Allison, Natalie, and Rebecca. And you see this beautiful, when you're normally in a distillery, there's a floor that comes across here. So all you see is this shoulder part right here. But we're so proud of our stills that we want you to see the shape of them. And the shape makes a difference on how we go about distilling, all the equipment in the back for the condensing and our heating and everything else that goes along. And so you can see this neck that comes here. So does anyone know the reason it's called beer, wine, and spirit, not beer, wine, and alcohol? We'll throw that one out there for a second. And also, the thing about it too is, when you distill, you don't make alcohol. You're extracting the alcohol out of the product. So we put our first batch, we put the body into the still, and when you put the body in here at 174 degrees, the vapor starts to rise. And as it rises up the neck, you look here into the portal, and Aristotle, he said that's the spirit leaving the body. And that's why it's called a spirit. And you'll see this ghostly white kind of go up, and it comes into the neck. And as it starts to cool down and condense through the condensers, it comes out as a liquid over here. So everything distilled is clear. All the color comes from the bottle. So this is the liquor safe, and as they come off of each one. So you can see, and you see the copper extract of the color coming through it too. That helps pull out some impurities and those kinds of things that we have going along with it.
Hey, Frank, Joe Van Nam asked, did anything ever get named after the fourth daughter?
We will see that in just a moment. Great question there, Joe. Well, why don't we head over there right now? We'll see the
now, before we do, Frank, if you could just go back to the stills for a second. I'm wondering what you guys are distilling to. What proof are you distilling to, and what's your barrel entry?
Drew, I couldn't really hear him. You want to? Can you?
Yeah, he was asking what we distill to in barrel entry. Unfortunately, Sam, I don't have a cut sheet in front of me to get into the technical on that. So we're going to have to dig in a little bit later.
Fair enough.
Just on a ballpark there, Sam, we're barrel entry around 65, depending on what we're doing. But because we experiment with so many different things, it's hard to say every one of them is the same. So,
great, thank you.
Yeah, we can bring them a little bit higher, lower. So 30% of all our production is experimental, is for innovation. So 70% is to make our small batch, our single grain, and our single malt, and then the other is about innovation and coming up with different things and trying. Again, because we believe, whiskey doesn't have to just be one thing from one house. We can make all different styles, and that's what we're trying to do for you right now. Like there's a debate on the single pot. They want to change the law on that. It's 30% malted barley, 30% unmalted barley, and as much as 5% any other grain. Well, if you look back at the single pots before the demise of Irish whiskey and the fall of Dublin whiskey, they were using all types of grain. And so it was much more than that 5%. It could be as much as 40 of something. So they're looking to try to bring that back, and that's something that we'll distill to and work off of.
And that's something, by the way, guys, who want to learn more about Irish whiskey, I do touch on Irish whiskey and pot still in the book. So if you don't have a copy yet, stay tuned for a chance to win a copy. But if you don't want to worry about winning a copy, towards the end of the show, I will put up a link to buy the book.
So you guys, we can't age whiskey in Dublin because of that great whiskey fire that was caused by the malting house. So we just kind of give you an idea of what it looks like here, some different barrel shapes, a port pipe, and things like that. But what I really like is this picture right here. They give you an idea of what whiskey is all about.
Yeah, so you can see, as we know, everything that comes off the still is clear. So all of our whiskey, anyone's tequila, vodka, it all comes out looking exactly the same. So that first column that you'll see there, this is the white whiskey, the clear whiskey coming off of the still, going into a barrel. That second column there, you'll see now we're losing some share, but we're picking up some color. This is 3 years in 1 day. This is now whiskey. This is officially whiskey that we could sell you as whiskey. That third column, you'll see this is our small batch. This is how much whiskey that we've lost, by the time that it's been aged in its primary casks and then finished in its Central American rum casks. And then that last barrel there, you'll see an example of a single cask and how much can get lost over its time. There are some of our favorite casks in the warehouse are, less than half full. And Frank's around less than half.
Yeah. Literally, you guys.
Just wait till I get there.
Oh, Sam, it's so much fun. When you go to Green Ore, so we age all our whiskey up in Green Ore. It's about 2-hour drive from the distillery, and it's right on the water. And when you're there, we don't pull a bung out of the top of the barrel, the bung right here, we take a drill and drill a hole into it. We stand all our barrels upright like this to age because we're starting out new, so we palletize everything. And you'll see drill holes coming down the side of the barrel, and out comes the whiskeys, flowing out. We put our glass, fill it up, then pound it back in. And I've had some of the greatest whiskeys I've ever had. The chestnut barrel is probably my second favorite barrel I've ever tasted, and my least favorite barrel is here. But like Alex says, if you don't fill a barrel, you don't know what it's like. And maybe filling a Brazilian hardwood for the first 5 years isn't any good, but at 12 years, it's one of the best whiskeys you've ever had. You don't know until you do it. And one of the cool things about the Irish whiskey, you guys, is that we are able to use any barrel type. And the reason for that is when the reason you can only use a bourbon barrel once is before Prohibition, you could use that barrel as many times as you wanted. But, and Drew said, they can live to be 100 years old of using those barrels. But after Prohibition, the Cooper said, wait, we'll be in business 4 years and we'll be done. So that's when they came up with the law. Bourbon has to be aged in virgin oak new barrels. So when that barrel is done being used that first time, they sell them off, and we buy them up, and all of these other houses buy them up. And when they came out with that law, the Scots said, that's a great idea. We should come out with a law like that too. So the Scots said, all whiskey has to be aged in oak barrels. Well, for us, the Irish, you don't want to do the exact same thing as the Scots do. And it's like copying somebody's homework. You don't want it to be the exact same. So we said it has to be aged in barrels like oak. And that's why we can use the hardwoods and the chestnuts and the cherry wood barrels in our whiskey maturation that the other places can't. And then Scotland right now is changing the laws so that they can do those kinds of things as it goes along.
Yeah, if you've been paying attention in Scotland last year, about a year and a half ago, there was a big change to what you can use for secondary maturation. And one of the things that came about was you can use agave barrels now for the first time. And this had been against the law for a very long time. Fruit brandy barrels were against the law. Beer barrels of certain types, cider barrels. All of these things were against the law. And there's some new innovations coming out of Scotland. Our friends over at Dewar's made a illegal mezcal finished Dewar's. If you haven't tried it, it is really incredible. I like having a bottle on hand for making highballs because you get a little bit of that smoke on the nose, a little bit of that kind of agave funk, but all of that Dewar's goodness underneath.
And you got to be careful, you guys, because once you open the bottle, start drinking it, it has a tendency to be empty when you're done.
Which is great because it's like on the shelf for like $20 or so.
Exactly. Yeah,
I was very excited actually when Scotch whiskey allowed alternative, for lack of a better term, alternative finishing barrels. So agave, or like you were saying, fruit brandy. That really excited me. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Now there's so much fun stuff that can happen.
You think about it, in our whiskeys, our small batches aged in bourbon barrels and then finished in rum casks. Our single grain spends its entire life in French oak, Napa Valley Cabernet barrels. Our single malt, Drew, this is a perfect time to talk about
the time to drink this. Yep.
Single malt, okay.
Yep. Grab that single malt.
I'm being very gentle with these corks because I'm afraid they're going to break like the small batch.
I don't know what Una was doing to those bottles. I think, she was using the shake.
She's twisting that cork every time right off. As our master distiller, master blender, Alex Chasco says, if you're ever going to make a single malt, do not use 6 different barrel types. It's just mind-boggling to be able to have to go through it. So the first 4, or the first one spends 23 years of his life, the entire time in Oloroso sherry barrels. Then the other 4 spend about 9 years in bourbon barrels, and then that are finished for 1 to 2 to 3 years in Napa Valley Cabernet, white Burgundy or Chardonnay, Madeira, and port. And Oh my gosh, you guys, all those notes. And this is one that I love just sipping on. And this is where I use my watch glass all the time. Because every time I come back and smell, I get something different. I'm just so excited about this whiskey because it just keeps coming and coming with all different types of flavors.
Frank, you've worked on Teeling for a while, and Drew, you've been working with the single malts, and now you're working on Teeling. What's your experience with the Tua glass?
So I have one of my favorite glassware stories. Portland Cocktail Week, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 9. I have no idea. Sometime within this decade, I went to a class, Portland Cocktail Week, and I walked into a room, and there's 30 people in the class, and there were 30 different glasses. And so it was a range at every different seat. It was a range from, a Glencairn to a big double rocks glass like you'd find in a dive bar, styrofoam cup, red Dixie cup, Riedel, wine glass, Salto whiskey cup, everything. It was all the range, and they all had something poured in them. And we had 30 seconds at each seat to smell what was in there, write our notes, and then move to the next seat. And it was like this for 30 seats, stopwatch, okay, next, okay, next, okay, next. And then we finish up the round, and then we have to guess what was in each of the glasses. And the room was so divided as to what was in each of the glasses, no one could decide if it was gin, if it was Genevieve, if it was rye whiskey, if it was bourbon, what was in all of the different glasses. People were just convinced that it was different things. And this was right before our friends at St. George Distillery had released their Reposado, their barrel-aged version of their dry rye gin, right? So it was a little bit of all of these things. That was the unfair trick, is that it's a rye mash bill-based gin that's aged in X whiskey barrels. But the fact that every single glass you picked up different notes, some amplified the juniper and those notes, some amplified the barrel notes. What I think is important about glassware is that you find the glass that you like best. And what that means is that, it's the right glass for the size of your nose. It's the right glass for how you drink. It's also the right glass for how you clean, right? If you have, I have really nice Burgundy wine glasses that are super fine crystal, but I never bust them out because, they're a pain in the butt to clean, right? And so I also find myself not drinking expensive Burgundy because I don't want to go through the whole rigmarole. And you don't want to get into that with whiskey, right? You don't want to get into a place where you don't want to open up the whiskey and taste it because you don't want to deal with cleaning the glass. So find a glass that you can use, that you like using, that you're not afraid to break because, face it, we will have a whiskey or two too many. We will drop a glass, we'll stumble, we'll fall. We've all done it. It just, sometimes happens. So, get the glass that you want to, that you're not going to be terribly sad if you break. Like, that's when people talk about a $50 or $100 glass, sometimes, I caution them.
Yes.
Somehow,
and the Tua glass M, I have them downstairs. I'm just not using it tonight. I do like it because on those I can get a little heavier pour than I can in a Glencairn glass, and I like the chimney shape on the top. So I do like that. I don't like those glasses when it comes to heavily peated whiskey because I think the chimney concentrates the peat.
I was going to use that one for the black pits.
No, you're okay with the black pits because it's not heavily peated. I'm talking like Port Charlotte or an Octomore style of peat.
Fair enough. Talking about glassware, we've all broken a Glencairn by accident. Like, I somehow had and I hadn't drank that much this night, just for the record, this night. Somehow
Tonight?
My Glencairn. No, not tonight. Like this night in the story that I'm about to talk about. I had this beautiful Glencairn that my friend Rory gave me from Peaton meeting here in SoCal with the LA Scotch Club and the OC and the St. Egil Scotch Clubs as well. And I must have put a glass when I was. I must have. I don't know what the hell happened. It fell off my nightstand, or I put a rocks glass. I have the bad habit of, oh, I finished the glass, cool, I'll leave it down next to my bed for the night. But I end up drinking whiskey in bed sometimes because I'm relaxing, I'm watching TV, or I'm playing a video game, and I don't want to get up off my arse and get into my damn chair. So I'll have a whiskey or two in bed sometimes. So I have this little gap next to my bed between my bed and my nightstand, and I've broken a few glasses this way, where I will put a glass down and I will knock it into another glass by accident, and I will break the glass that's already on the ground.
Well, I'll have to give you one of these, gold dipped Aberfeldy Glencairns next time I see you. They bounce, so when you drop them, that layer of wax, helps.
Yes.
I actually thought about dipping a Glencairn before, and I was wondering how one would do it. And I guess if you do it, dip it, put some kind of like tong or something on the inside, so it's holding it from the inside, and then you dip it straight down instead of upside down, right side up, I guess. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, a little bit. The mechanics of it, I got lost.
Anyway,
so earlier you said what happens with the fourth daughter with the stills? Well, there happens to be 5 daughters in the Teeling family right now. Jack has 3 daughters and Stephen has 2. So instead of a still, they get their own bottle of single pot, or their own barrel of single pot. So when they turn 18, it's going to be the best party ever. And I'm personally going to make sure I'm there for Zoe and Holly's birthday. And these are the few of the barrels that we do actually have live whiskey in at the distillery. It's in a temperature controlled lock and key room. So nothing can happen from there.
Yeah, there used to be a countdown clock above them, counting down to 3 years in one day. I was there at the distillery about 20 days after whiskey aged into whiskey, and so the countdown clock had stopped, and we've since taken it down because there's nothing to count down to anymore. But it was a big moment, right? It's the first whiskey being distilled in Dublin in over 125 years. Bringing that back to the city center. Teeling is very much a part of the Dublin fabric. When I was traveling around, Dublin, there's these big black Teeling barrels in front of every bar, and you order an Irish coffee and you get in a Teeling glass, and everyone's excited to talk about Teeling because it's they're the local boys that came back and made good, right?
So let's head into the inside here. This is when you finish your tour. We have you come on in, and actually over here, and normally on these walls will be all painted up. So we want you to leave your mark. So right on the walls here of what you want, and you can see everyone's just writing away as it's going. Oops, what happened there? You can see mine's up here. I put it as high as I could so no one would write over the top of it as we're having fun. So we want you to leave your mark at Teeling and have a good time. Because whiskey is not about being pretentious. We don't want to make unicorns. We want to have whiskeys that everybody loves, tastes, and will drink along with us.
My Teeling unicorn. No, you just said you guys don't want unicorns, but my Teeling unicorn isn't even that much of a unicorn, actually. It's one of the original Carcavelos releases.
Oh yeah, Sam.
I fell in love with
a great bottle. There's still like a 6-pack or 2 left in Las Vegas. It is awesome.
Really?
Yeah, I found a bottle on the shelf the other day when I was traveling around in San Jose, and I had to snatch it up. There was 2 bottles, in fact, and so I got one for me and one for Anne Marie. So next time I send you some samples, Sam, if you don't have any more Carcavelos, I'll send you a couple ounces.
You know what? The only other one that is just as equally rare and important for me is the Carcavelos, and you know what? I'm gonna take us out of the distillery tour here for a second and bring us back to focusing on us, as I grab the book, because for this I need to go to the book. And you can literally go into my book to find it right now. Irish whiskey. Going to the
55.
Irish whiskey section, you guys. It is the original Teeling Plantation rum finish. Was my absolute most favorite Teeling ever in the world. Subtle rum-esque flavors, fruity apple and pineapple. Some notes of banana, sugary molasses.
The Teeling and the plantation have such a wonderful relationship with whiskey. It's just awesome.
Oh my God, it's amazing. And the Stiggins, I'm a little mad that we didn't get the Stiggins out here.
Yeah, there's definitely some plantation casks. I've gotten to try. I haven't tried the Stiggins, but I've tried some of the other plantation casks that have been released over the years. There are some really phenomenal rum casks that have been released, but unfortunately, a cask is only so big, right? And you have to make a decision as a company. Hey, this one's going to come to the U.S. This one's going to stay in the U.K. This one's going to stay in Ireland. This one's going to stay in Europe. Whatever it might be, right? And so different markets get different things. I will say, from the business standpoint, the more regular Teeling we drink, the more small batch, single malt, and single grain we drink, and we can show the boys that we've got a thirst for it here, the more that we'll start getting some cool releases. It's just kind of how the business of this all works, right? Whoever your top buyers are, if it's the U.S., if it's India, if it's China, whatever it is, you're going to reward them with some Easter eggs. And so that's how it is with not just our company. That's how all of the whiskey companies work. And we certainly we got our share of some really cool casks this year. Here in California, we got 14-year-old PX barrel Teeling. We got a 14 or a 15-year-old cognac cask. Those were incredible. I didn't get to try the rum cask that we got here, but I'm not saying we're getting shortchanged. But the more Teeling you all drink and help us drink, the more we're going to get some cool stuff.
So we had a couple of great questions coming in, actually, that I want to address. But before we do, I just want to say, so it's almost as if Teeling is a business and you're trying to make money. That can't be right, can it?
Yeah, the whiskey business, we do have to remember that it is a business. I see a question about 700 milliliter bottles. That's actually a really great point.
So TTB. Do you want to read it out, or do you want me to read it out?
You can read it out.
So Joseph Van Nam, Joe is actually a graduate as well from the Whiskey Marketing School, the program that certifies whiskey sommeliers. Which is the course that I've attended. He actually is one of the, guest instructors, I believe, as well.
Oh, nice to meet you, Joe.
Will the option of 700 milliliter bottles, now be the recent TTB change, prevent us from being excluded from cool releases in the future?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things in the past, if a company, and I'm not going to speak just for us, it's for all companies, if you have a bottling line and you've got to set up a separate bottling day for 700 milliliter and 750 milliliter bottles, sometimes that might be the decision just not to send something to the United States. So the recent change in law of the TTB right over at the end of December, and for those of you who don't know who the TTB are, they're the folks that do all of the label approvals and essentially all of the importing approvals for spirits in the United States. I had a friend who used to work as an importer, and listening to some of those phone calls with the TTB, it is painful work. But since they're moving to allow the 700 milliliter bottles, I can't speak specifically for Teeling because I don't know at that business level in Dublin. But I would imagine that it might open us up for some more interesting things. Frank?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at it, and I think it will open up the market for us for more interesting things because that gives us economy of scale, to be able to bring things over. The one thing when we do a lot of barrel selects, it is it's one barrel, and so where do you put that barrel as it goes through? I mean, when we had the chestnut, it's basically 300 bottles came to the States. So if you find a bottle, buy it up. And I think Dave Stewart might have been with me when we were drinking it. And it's just truly phenomenal. But the reason it came to the United States is I was over with Alex. We're in the warehouse tasting. And this is Alex, you guys, and the barrel itself. I don't know if you can see it.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, shoot, wrong picture. Let's see. Oh, right here. Here we go. See how black that barrel is?
Whoa.
It's like stickum, Sam. You put your hand on it and like stick to it, and you got to pull it off because it's the most porous barrel in the world. And so, you lose 20% a year out of it. But the chestnut flavor, the wood, it's like no other whiskey I've ever had. And we were there drilling, and I kept saying, "What's that? What's that?" And Alex was like, "No." And we went over and drilled it, and I said, "We're bringing this to the States," and we did. And it's absolutely phenomenal. It's just absolutely phenomenal whiskey. And that's how some of our whiskeys come over here. And that's, we'll continue that kind of a fun, thing with it. And that's one of the reasons Black Pitts is here today.
So before we go into the Black Pitts, Frank, Jason had a question on the plantation casks. He
Sure.
said, are they the proper rum casks, the original rum casks, or are they the finishing casks that plantation uses?
We'll have to ask Alex on that exact question. I'm not positive.
Fair enough.
Yeah, Alex is pretty transparent. So, I imagine that, if it was a sherry cask that had plantation and then was a sherry cask, he'd want to talk about that. Plus, you would want to know because you want to drink something that was rum into sherry. And usually the inside baseball side of it, our finishing casks for any distillery, you keep them around for a while, right? So those aren't the things that kind of get released as much. It's mostly the primary casks that get released. Exactly. So, we don't know exactly, but I imagine if the label says plantation rum cask, it was the primary rum cask, not a finishing cask.
And you can, if you shoot us an email, we'll get you the
you.
exact answer on that question for you too.
In fact, let me put up your emails real quick right now. Give me 1 second. My computer's a little slow here.
While he's pulling up email, you can always follow me on the old Instagram at Ranwed, Ranwed. I don't know what it means. It's an anagram for Andrew. I was writing a medieval epic in the style of, Lord of the Rings in like the 5th and 6th grade, and that was the name I came up with for myself. So somehow it's my social media handle still all these years later.
I always wondered that. I wonder where that came from, Drew.
Yeah.
And if you guys want to follow me, I'm at Drink with Frank.
And their emails, guys, are on the bottom of the screen. Drew is really easy. It's a record at teamenterprises.com.
Yep.
And then Frank's is fcjakubka at bacardi.com.
Correct.
And I'll leave those up for another couple of minutes.
For anybody that can say Jakubka.
Jakubka.
Bonus point there.
I'll leave that up for another couple of seconds. We have some more comments coming in. Jason says it doesn't matter, both are good, but I've been wondering, there are often some really interesting finishing casks used.
Yeah,
yes, there are some amazing casks that have been used for finishing.
I'll give you a story. So Dewar's 25 is finished in Royal Brockla casks. So Royal Brockla is a single malt distillery. It's a distillery that has history going back to 1812. It's this beautiful place, the Cawdor Estate. And I asked Stephanie McLeod, the master blender for Dewar's and for Royal Brockla. So when it says finished in Royal Brockla cask, what does that mean? Because Royal Brockla is finished for 12 months in Oloroso sherry cask. And so I was like, hey, is this Dewar's 25 that's been aged in Royal Brocla sherry finishing casks, or is it aged in the primary casks? And what she explained is that primary cask maturation is what's more important there. If she wanted to use sherry to finish the Dewar's, she just would have used sherry cask. But if she used an old sherry cask that had previously held Royal Brocla, it loses some of that sherryness. And so when a blender, at least what Stephanie was explaining, when a blender is looking at that what the finish can do, you want to go back to the root of it. So you find that primary cask. You want to get the influence from that initial cask. And so in Royal Brocla's case, these are all ex-bourbon casks or some rechar casks that aged Royal Brocla exclusively for 12 years. Soaks up that Royal Brocla and then uses that as the finishing agent for the Dewar's.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. Although I do want to see a whiskey finished in, like you were saying, was it the sherry cask that Brocla was finished in? I would be curious to see a whiskey, either full maturation or, a secondary maturation, a whiskey that, was aged in ex-bourbon, for instance, and then goes into one of those finishing casks that was used to finish whiskey before. I'd also be curious to see
it's like whiskey inception, right?
In a peated cask. It's whiskey and whiskey and whiskey and sherry and whiskey.
Sherry and peat sherry and peat do interesting things together, or to each other. I love what sweeter wine. So I think Sauterne, does really interesting things to peat as well, which is a great segue for talking about the black pits. I think that the natural sweet notes of these casks, like Pedro Jimenez, like Sauternes, like Banyuls, any of these the dessert wines, Tokai, that we can use for secondary maturation. It really it's like when you're trying to set the contrast on a picture, you just brighten everything up, right? Because you have the Sauterne as this background, everything else comes into focus so much more clearly. The black pits is you should pour some for yourself right now. I'd taste along, but again, you've got my bottle, so I'm just gonna have to remember what it tastes like when I tasted it. But this is a whiskey. It's got that backbone similar to the pot still that you've tasted, right? Because this is juice that we made. This is Alex Chasko's whiskey. This isn't the family stock. This is Teeling whiskey made in Dublin. This is the first Dublin peated, whiskey. Yes, there are other Irish, peated whiskeys. But this is Dublin's first peated, Irish whiskey of the modern era. I think Alex has done a great job bringing that Sauterne in there for part of the maturation. This harkens back to the 24-year whiskey that won the single malt of the year. Teeling was the first non-Scotch to win that single malt of the year award. And it was a Sauterne cask, right? That 24-year-old Teeling, it was Sauterne. And so I think Alex has brought that back into this. Frank's got some of that's the unicorn right there.
Oh, wow. Now, real quick, Frank, is there any more for the tour that I should re-spotlight, or just back to the three of us now?
Well, why don't we finish with the Bang Bang, then we'll just go back. We can finish up here. So the Bang Bang Bar is named after a local character that after World War I, he would hop on and off the trolleys and he'd shoot everybody up. So if he'd walk into a bar, he'd go bang, 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 bang. And so the Bang Bang, he lived right where the distillery is now. So they named the bar the Bang Bang Bar. As it goes, when you're there, you can come here and get some great unique whiskeys for yourself. You can also finish up over here, and you can bottle your own whiskey and label it with your own label to it if you want. these are, one of a kind little things for you guys to be able to try and have some fun with. So you can, produce your own unicorn to come home to. And this is our little shop. If you do go, you don't have to take the tour. You're welcome to come up just to the bar. We have a lot of locals that head up to the bar and have a wee little dram on a regular basis as they're hanging out. Or as my grandpa used to say, when Gaga would say, "How many drinks have you had today?" He'd say, "2. I've only had 2." And she'd walk away and he'd say, "The top half of that bottle and the bottom half of that one." And Grandpa made me look tiny. So he would put it away. But we want you to take a little picture here in front of the Phoenix and post it to the internet, you guys. Have some fun with it. So should we stop sharing and just taste the black pits right now, Sam?
Well, while you're tasting black pits, I need to have something in my glass. So I'm going to pour a little bit of this 14-year-old cognac barrel that I picked up from Bevmo. This was a single cask for Northern California here. That if you're watching us in Northern California, you could go pick one of these up at Bevmo. It's pretty incredible.
And I'm drinking the PX from Total Wine.
Oh, there you go.
So, did we lose Sam?
It looks like we lost him, but we can keep talking for a minute.
So why don't we go over? So for the people that are watching this, maybe Sam's show for the first time or don't know what peat is, because our Black Pits is a peated whiskey. It's the first peated whiskey out of Dublin, and what peat is anything that was once living. So plant, animal, insect, person, when it dies and it breaks down in the bog, it becomes peat. So there's 5 levels to peat. Level 1 and 2 are the ones that we're familiar with Islay off the island of Scotland, where things like Ardbeg and Lagavulin and Lefroy and Bruichladdich are at. And they use levels 1 and 2 peat. And that's that iodine, Brussels sprout kind of a flavor, a lot of sea influence. And then when you go to level 3, it's going from organic. So 1 and 2, it's breaking it down. All the bacterias and the molds are breaking everything down. That's that bag of sphagnum you put in your garden in your backyard. Level 3 feels like a dirt clod, like this really heavy dirt clod when you dig it. And then, and that's going from organic to inorganic. And then level 4 and 5 are inorganic. There's nothing left alive in it. It's getting pressured down and pressed down. And before you know it, it's going to become 1-2 things: diamonds, or in Scotland's case, petroleum. And that's why it burns so well, as it goes. So we're using level 4-5 peat, and that's why we have more of a barbecue flavor smoke to our whiskey than we have an iodine that a lot of people think of the classic Lagavulin or Ardbeg, some of the great peated whiskeys that I love. Sam, you're back.
I am back. Sorry, I had to take care of something real fast.
No worries.
Nature was calling. I'm only one man.
Don't worry about it. So Black Pit, you guys, is releasing here in the States. Just got 93 points in the Whiskey Advocate.
Oh,
wow. And to me, this is so much fun. So that 24 that I held up that bottle. So if you do find that 24 out there, it is a unicorn. It's one of those special whiskeys, that is aged for 21 years in bourbon and then finished with 3 years in Sauterne, where this is aged 2/3 in bourbon, 1/3 Sauterne cask. And the pineapple, the fruit that comes through on this is amazing. The parts per million is much lighter than you would get off of like an Islay whiskey, 40 to 55 parts per million. So it's really a great way to make a whiskey balanced overall.
Helen earlier had a great question that I wanted to address when we got to Black Pits. Let me find it real quick. I might not be able to go back all the way to the beginning of chat. Helen, if you're still in here, would you please re-ask your question? I can't find it right now. It's all look back at the beginning of chat. But essentially, it was, how does the ppm of black pits compared to the ppm of a typical Islay Scotch whiskey?
Drew, you want this one, or you want me to do it?
Yeah. So, like Frank said, our Islay whiskeys, typically in the 30 to 60 range, ppm. Some of the big boys, right, are the heavily peated, can get 70, 80. Now, the thing that we have to remember about ppm is that this is rated of parts per million in the whiskey at a stage before it is aged. And so after the aging process, things can change. And so the whiskey can definitely come out a little bit less peaty. But this is for folks who don't like a big peated Islay whiskey. This is much more comparable to like a lightly peated Speyside whiskey, right? Something in that 10 to 20 ppm range. It has the approaching nose of peat. There's a little bit of smoke on there, but it's not overwhelming. It's integrated into the body. And again, because of that sauterne cask finish, that sauterne cask that's used in the production of the whiskey, I think the sweetness offsets some of that smoke.
It does.
Great answer. And there was her question. She just said, like I said, how does it compare to Islay?
So if you want to think about Lagavulin, Lafroig, they're about 40 parts per million peat, Ardbeg about 55, and we sit around 15 parts per million peat. And, so those big boys, you have Octomore that's on par all the time at 160 to 300 parts per million peat. And then there's the thing of hot smoked and cold smoked, peat. And, that's a whole nother show with Sam that we'll spend 3 hours with, because I love all the smoke that comes along with it. But
we'll invite a bunch of producers of smoky spirits, of smoky whiskeys, and we'll go into that whole, fun thing about ppm.
So to me, too, what I really love about this whiskey, you guys, is that, people go, oh, I don't like peated whiskey. Say, that's great. Don't tell them it's peated. Let them try it. And they're like, oh, my God, what is this? Because of that bourbon barrel, because of the sauterne cask and the smoke all being so balanced together that it doesn't overwhelm you. And Sam, you're the one drinking it. Can you hold it up to the camera, let everybody see the bottle itself, too? So you guys, Black Pits is an area that's right next to where the distillery is, and it's where they would tan the leather. And so again, doing some of those things outside of those walls, the pits were black, and that's where the term Black Pits comes from. So we think it's appropriate with the smokiness that go along with it too.
Trevor Wankett asked a phenomenal question of, when we're talking about parts per million, what are we referring to? We're referring to the amount of phenols left behind in the whiskey pre-maturation, but post-distillation by the peat. So peat, there's a chemical compound, I guess is the easiest way to describe it, in peat, there's phenols. The smoke that's coming through on the still is a phenolic compound. It's a phenolic ester. Joe, I'm in a professional studio all set up right here. I don't need a ring light.
Joe, we were saying that he looked a little dark earlier, but
I mean,
I'm just at my kitchen table.
So parts per million, Trevor, really comes down to the higher the parts per million, typically it's going to give you a lot more smoke up front on the palate. And the lower it is, obviously it's going to be more towards the back of the palate. But really what we're looking at is hot smoke, cold smoke, what are you trying to get out of it, the barrels that it ages in. And then when you they use peat this way. So when they trick the grain into thinking it's germinating, so they put it into water, and the grain's kind of shaped like your hands, like this, and it opens up, and out comes a taproot. And when that taproot comes out, the plant says, "Oh, it's spring. I'm gonna, produce sugar." So the sugars start to change from simple to complex, and then we put them on a secondary floor, on the second floor of a building with tiny little holes in it, and they put the smoke from underneath, and that dries the grain until it gets to about 5 moisture, and then the grain closes up and drops the taproot. But now we have all that smoky flavor inside. Other places like a Macallan would do it with steam, or we do it with steam, and other places to dry it down. But when that happens, that's when they take that measurement, and that's where you'll see 55 parts per million. But then you ferment it, you're going to lose some parts per million. You distill it, you barrel age it, all those parts come down. So it really comes into the fact that I'm not a big believer in putting that parts per million on a label because people get caught up with it. It's what do you like flavor profile wise? Our bag, which has always been, for me, growing up in the industry, very aggressive, peated whiskey, can be very fruity at the same time, and I just love that about it. And that's one of the things that I love about it. So when you see parts per million, it's just something to gauge it and then try it yourself, see what you like, and you'll start to figure out where you sit.
A great suggestion. I cannot hammer this point home enough. We talked about it earlier. Try it. Especially if you've never had it, try it. Just because, it's Scotch and Scotch, I don't like Scotch because Scotch is smoky. Well, no, not all Scotch is smoky. Or, all Irish whiskey is thin, watery, and grainy. No, there are certain big name brands that are thinner, waterier, and grainier, but not all Irish whiskey is like that. And within each category of whiskey, there are multiple styles. As we've seen tonight, Teeling has a pot still, a single malt, a single grain. They have a small batch, which I'm guessing is blended of the 3 different styles.
Sorry, the small batch. So it's a blend of grain whiskey and single malt whiskey.
Yes.
Okay, so there's no pot still in there.
No pot still in there. Yeah, no.
And for the smoky whiskey, you guys, one of my favorite ways to try it is on oysters.
Which was very cool. Thank you, Jen. This was neat, pun intended. And remember, guys, I go live every Tuesday, usually around 4 p.m. The next couple of weeks is a little wonky because we've got multiple. I'm insane. I was about to do 12 whiskeys almost in one night next week, you guys, but I came to my senses and I'm like, hang on.
That's too much, Sam.
That might not be a good idea.
Too much.
So, and they give you guys an idea on the Black Pits. There's 840 bottles hitting the West Coast. And when I mean West Coast, that's Northern California and Southern California. That's it. So when you're out and about and you find it, try a bottle, pick a bottle up. One of the great things about Teeling, if you love Teeling, our small batch is 100, our single grain's 200, our single malt's 300, the single pot's 4, and the Black Pits will be about 1,000. No, not at all. We want you drinking whiskey. We want you, when it's Wednesday night, you say, oh, should I have a Chardonnay? No, have a Teeling. Our Teeling is about $32 to $34 a bottle. The single grain 42. Our single malt's about 55. The single pot and the Black Pits are going to be about $65 to $70 a bottle, depending where you're at across the country. We really want our whiskey to be attainable, affordable. We don't want trophies. If you come to my house, I have a big collection. You can drink absolutely anything you want because nothing's off limits. I want to remember the night to say, Sam, remember the night we had that? Not I have it. That's the key to me.
I look forward to that as well. It's like, hey, Frank, you remember the time that we had this, really random whiskey that was actually complete garbage that wasn't from Teeling, was not Teeling? Some of my friends the Whiskey Crusaders, who some people in the comments watch as well, they did a bottom shelf night last night, and their heads still hurt. Not for the amount of whiskey they drank, they had small pours, but because of what a friend said is probably trace methanol remaining in the whiskey.
Well, yeah, that can happen. You know, I can't speak for anything that comes in a plastic jug.
Yeah.
Oh. David asked, any hints where it's headed in LA, the Black Pits?
Hey, Dave, I think you're going to find it. Is Una on the line still?
Una is still here.
Una, do you want to chime in? You know, Una probably, tell you some of her favorite spots where you'll be able to get it down there.
I'd imagine Wine and Liquor Depot will have it.
Yeah. Probably Mission Liquors, Wally's, some Bevmo's, Total Wines down there will get it.
Bevmo and Total Wine are great, Frank. They're really great stores, but I'm a huge advocate of shopping small and supporting small business. So go to your local corner store, go to Wally's, go to Kano Wines. They're still a small business, even though they're huge. They're still a small, independently run business.
Here's the real hint. It may be in limited supply, but it is not an allocated product. So, David, go to the nearest liquor store that you've got a relationship with, talk to the buyer and tell them, hey, I would like this. And you can tell them it's distributed by Southern Wine and Spirits. And so they only have to, figure out who their Southern Wine Spirits, rep is. And I can guarantee you they've got one. If they've got a bottle of nearly anything on the shelf, if you see Grey Goose on the shelf, you see Bombay Sapphire on the shelf, if you see, Patron on the shelf, they've got a Southern Wine Spirits
rep. If you see
rep.
Dewar's on the shelf, they have a Southern Wine and Spirits rep.
Yeah.
So yeah, just, tell them, hey, I would like to get this. And they, a good shop should special order it for you. And like I said, it's not an allocation, so they don't have to worry about jumping through any hoops, but it is limited supply. So when it's gone, it's gone, unless y'all like it so much that we have to tell Alex that he has to keep making more of it.
So I didn't realize.
We think it's going to last 2 weeks at the distributor to give you an idea. But that's it.
Interesting. So I assumed that Black Pit was a new permanent line edition.
No, so the Trinity is our core. Those three will be around forever and ever. We want them to be in good supply on every shelf. The pot still is what we would consider a limited annual release. So there'll be some that's released every year. If it runs out before the next release, then there would be a limited run on that. Right now we haven't really encountered that. We've had a pretty good supply, but as more people find it and love it, it'll definitely come to the place where there might be 5-6 months out of the year that we just don't have any pot still. And then the plan with Black Pits is that Alex wants to do inventive, fun things, and the best way to do that is to sell out an inventive, fun thing and move on to the next project. Now, I love this whiskey, and I would love for it to be a permanent line extension. Unfortunately, I'm not that high up the chain, so I've got to ask Frank to do that for me. But Alex and Jack and Steven are their own folks, and we'll see what they decide. I know that this whiskey with 93 points in Spectator, Whiskey Advocate, it's going to be pretty popular. It's going to fly off the shelf. So.
Yeah. And, Sam, when it comes to the releases every year, the single pot will come out once a year. And again, it will be limited because it is so small, so young. We don't have unlimited amounts to put out there. The Black Pits, there are some things in the channel behind it that we're looking at. But like Drew said, we're talking with, we meet with the Irish. We're talking with them about, whether we keep it or, put other things out there. And they're talking about a whole series coming from there. Now, the good thing for us in California, and I'm sorry for the gentleman in Kansas, is I live in California, so I'm lucky, my position, I got to make sure that all these things show up in my market. So Drew and I will always have a nice little supply together of that. So everyone in California.
Here's the only problem with that is you and Drew are co-conspirators in the Bay Area.
Yes, we are. We're right by each other.
So
I see Joseph
has to yell at you guys like, "Hey guys, come on, send some to us down here in SoCal."
I see Joseph in the chat asking about East Coast Maryland or DC. DC, the lovely thing is they're the Wild West. They can get spirits from anywhere because they're under federal authority. So it's a little bit different there. Frank, what do you know about Maryland?
Maryland is not going to right now, but Joseph, if you shoot us an email, I will put you in contact with our person on the East Coast and let you know the exact account you can get some from.
That is amazing, guys. Yes, I know, Joe. I'm sure he's going to. Jason says, make sure Remedy keeps stock and he'll take care of himself.
Yeah, Remedy is a great account down there.
Area,
and I
so
think
Whiskey Shop USA or Bounty Hunter.
Oh, I love both those shops. It depends on what neighborhood I'm in. If I'm up, Walnut Creek or Napa, I'm obviously at Bounty Hunter. If I'm, in the city, Whiskey Shop is fantastic. If I'm East Bay, I love Ledger's. Ed Ledger. If you think Frank and I can talk for a long time about whiskey, you've never talked to Ed Ledger about whiskey. I had a meeting with him at like 2:00 on the 23rd of December, and I was flying home. That was my last meeting of the year. This last year, not pandemic year. And so, I was like, Ed, I got a flight to catch at 6, and he's like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'm looking at my watch. Finally, I'm like, Ed, I had my suitcase with me. I was like, Ed, I have to go. I'm gonna miss my flight. He's like, oh yeah, this is just one more story.
I love Ed Ledger. I literally love Ed Ledger. He's one of the great guys. He's an icon in the industry. And Jason, just to let you know, since Drew and I are in the Bay Area, if you get a bottle of Black Pits, call us up, let us know. We'll come over. We'll actually open the bottle and pour it for you to help you understand the whiskey. Because, hey, we love to drink. We'll have a good time with you.
If you're in the Sacramento area, definitely try and support Good Bottle and then Rocco Wine and Spirits, two more fantastic independent accounts.
Yeah, we love those guys up there. They're wonderful. They'll help you out. This will be at both those accounts, you guys, if you're in the Sacramento area.
A friend of mine sent me a picture of my smiling face on a TV in a shop, and I was like, what is going on? And then I realized, I'm like, you're a Good Bottle, aren't you? And so I guess a talk that I had done on a bottle of 1925 Dewar's that they found, he was running on loop in the shop, and there was my smiling face on Zoom.
Yeah, and we guys support your local mom and pop, support that local business. And in the industry, a lot of us we do dry January to kind of give ourselves a break and some mental and physical health throughout the year. If you're doing dry January this year, the restaurants need you, the bars need you now more than ever. So buy gift certificates. Go.
And then probably spread those gift certificates.
What did you say, Drew?
Buy gift certificates that you don't plan to ever use.
Yeah,
give
that's
them
a
free
nice
money
one there, Sam. Yeah. These accounts really need your help right now, and so if you're going low ABV, you're going dry, still support your local pub, your local restaurant, and help them out.
Frank.
I see a question. What about Phoenix? What about our
Phoenix?
What about
Phoenix,
our logo,
Arizona,
or the town?
Phoenix this year got the single pot for the first time. They're getting single pot, and the Black Pits will not be coming to Phoenix. But Trevor, shoot me an email, and I will help you find some.
Century Grand is my favorite bottle shop in Phoenix. Jason Asher has done such an amazing job with that program and that whiskey collection. I don't think I've seen more single barrels of whiskey in any other bar in my travels on the West Coast. And trust me, I'm in and out of whiskey bars. When we were still allowed to fly. Century Grand was the most single barrels I'd ever seen in one place.
And take the train ride, you guys. Go on to the train ride, get your cocktail. It's 90 minutes from start to finish. It is amazing.
And guys, again on screen are Drew and Frank's emails as we start to wrap up for the night. I just want to say thank you again for tuning in and watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe. And smack the notification bell like Drew and I smacked pins when we were bartending.
Hey, so Sam, are you able to get all the people that wrote questions into you today, or how can we give out some books? Is there a way to track those people?
Great question. Here's what I'm going to say. If you asked the question on chat today, if you're still watching, if you were in here, you were asking a question today, please email me or hit me up on Instagram or on Facebook. Tell me what question you asked, and I will get you in touch with Frank and Drew, and they will figure out how to get you your copy of the book, if you want to do that. But while we have you guys,
you can have Sam sign the book to you, personalize the book for you, and we'll get those books and we'll get them out to you.
What I was hoping to do was a little bit of a Q&A giveaway at the end here, now that we're starting to wrap up. Helen, thank you so much. That's so kind of you.
Oh, thanks, Helen.
Just really wanted to say how informative and enjoyable this has been. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers. Helen, here's to California, way out by the sea, where the whiskey flows and everything goes. That is the place to be. Slunjava.
Slunjava.
I mean, I just think my lucky stars that the fine folks at Bacardi still pay me to get to talk to the two of you and everyone who's out there in internet land. It's still crazy to me that I have the job title of whiskey ambassador, right? My mom doesn't quite understand it. She wonders if I have diplomatic immunity. And when I got a parking ticket a couple of years ago, her question was, well, I thought ambassadors couldn't get parking tickets. And I had to explain that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, it is incredible that we just get to chat about whiskey all night.
So I checked my phone real quick, just out of curiosity, and I think my cousin Aaron is watching actually, which is really cool. So hello to Jacksons. Hello, thank you guys for tuning in. I miss all of you guys. So
hi, Sam's cousins.
Drew, do you want to give up some of the dope swag you have to some of our viewers?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think I've got a couple of flasks that are not behind me anymore because I moved things around. But I've got a couple of Teeling flasks that I would love to send out. I think Helen had some great questions throughout, and I'd love to send I think as a random draw, send Helen a flask. So if you want to send us your address, we can get that in the mail. My cursor isn't working to scroll up, so maybe Frank, if you want to pick someone else that we can send something to.
I can't see the chat. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I think it would be great to send something to Jason and or David or both of them.
Let's send it to both of them. So Jason, David, and Helen. I've only got 2 flasks, so the third person will get a different Teeling prize. We'll get some things out into the mail. Just send us your mailing address there, and so happy to have people involved and engaged and just getting to chat.
So the rule of flasks is this, you guys. If you get if you buy your own flask, you can only use it twice, and then you have to give it away. And when you give a flask, it has to be full. Now, we're going to be sending these flasks through the mail. So, Drew, I don't know if they can be full or not, right? Yeah. And when you get a flask, you dig your initials into it and the date. And now let's say we're all at a Warriors game, being from Northern California, and I pull my flask out, take a pull, and hand it to Drew so he can have a pull. If Drew doesn't have a flask, he has to buy my first drink inside. Or if we're out hitting the lake, Sam and I take a pull and I put it on my bag and I walk to hit a drive and Sam puts it in his pocket, it's no longer my flask, it's his, because I didn't take care of the flask. So that's the rule of flask, you guys, as you go.
Almost like a challenge coin.
It's a challenge coin, but with a bottle full of booze. And so if you send through Helen and Dave and the third part, we'll see what we can do and take care of you guys. We'll make sure we get it going. Everybody else that has a question.
And of course, guys, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Tony, great stuff, guys. He had a great question. He said, can you talk about Collinstown and if it will only be available at the Dublin airport based on the name, or if it could ever expand past that? Tony, great question.
All of us like to have some aces up our sleeves, and duty free and airport shops are certainly one of those aces. And so, things that are exclusive for the airport usually never make it beyond the airport, right? They're designed to be that last souvenir. You went to Dublin, you went to the distillery, you loved it, you forgot to buy a bottle, and then lo and behold, you're at the Dublin airport and there's a cute little Irish lady, who's pouring samples. When I got off on the plane, connecting in Dublin, there's like this 75-year-old woman who's like, you want to try some Irish whiskey? It's like, absolutely, I want some Irish whiskey. And then she starts pouring Teeling. I started laughing. Unfortunately, I think you got to fly through Dublin to get a bottle of the Collinstown.
And Tony, if you still have some, I want a 100 ml coming my way.
How about this, Frank? He sends you 50 ml and sends me 50 ml.
Oh, I like that, Sam. That works well.
Unless he wants to do 33.33 ml to split between you, me, and Drew.
Well, we'll get Tony to send the 50 ml to me, and then Drew and I will split the 50 ml as we sit and toast.
So as we start to wind down, I know I keep saying this, but I'm really just so excited and so happy that so many people tuned in. We had over 20 people watching it, which is the most people I've had on my live stream ever. I'm just getting started with this channel. So Frank, Drew, thank you guys so much for doing this with me and taking the time out of your no doubt busy schedules, because I'm sure you have everyone wanting to do virtual events with you guys, to sit down and take the time to, nerd out with me and talk about this fantastic Irish whiskey that's bringing whiskey, the revival of whiskey in Dublin City. Thank you both so much. I love what I do, and I know you guys do as well. Drew, you said it earlier. Being a whiskey professional at a whiskey show is a dangerous game. But being a whiskey professional who runs a whiskey show, that's also a very dangerous game.
All right, Sam. So everyone that asked a question, send Sam an email, get a hold of him, and we'll have Sam personalize the books on out to you guys. We will get the flask that we talked about on out there too, and we'll take care of you guys that way. I appreciate the time, that you guys have hung in there with us. It's a lot of fun being able to talk whiskey. If there's anything in this world that I'm a nerd about is alcohol. It doesn't matter what type it is. I just absolutely love it. And let's finish off by raising a glass. You guys, this is my 37th year in the industry since my first crush. And I started with absolutely nothing. And today I still have most of it.
37 years, Frank. How is that possible?
Hey, it goes back plus 40 from just bartending time from working in the bars.
Wow.
37 was my first crush. this industry is so much fun. It's just filled with life. I get to meet all these great characters. Sam, from the first time I met you, I knew we were going to be friends forever. Sam is a character, you guys. We just have this. It's an industry that's filled with so much fun and such a great time. So I just so appreciate being part of it.
Drew, I made a toast. Frank's made a toast. Your turn.
Well, it's 2021. We made it through 2020, and that's all I can say at the moment. Thank God it's another year, and thank God we have another day to drink whiskey together at least. Cheers, Sláinte.
Cheers, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna call it here for the night. Thank you for tuning in for as long as you did, no matter how long that was. I do greatly appreciate it. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I do these shows every week. Next week is going to be a fantastic Scotch tasting with some Glen Scotia malts. I have Forbes McMullen, the head of education for the U.S. for the Loch Lomond Group, and Gary Miller, the brand manager, joining me next week, and that will be at 2 p.m. Pacific time. I know it's a little early for a lot of you guys, but because, where the hell else do I have to go? It doesn't matter what time I start drinking anymore. So there are good ships and there are wood ships, and there's ships that sail the sea. But the best ships are friendships, and may they always be. San Shiva. Ladies and gentlemen, have yourselves a great night, and I will see you next week. Cheers.
See you guys.
Cheers.
Come on, computer. There we go. Oh, and one last thing. I know I've already ended, but one last thing. If you're after a book, DM me either on Instagram or on Facebook. That is the fastest way to get a hold of me. And I will make sure you get a copy of your book. So, Blanche, cheers. Good night.